Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F Podcast, where we try not to F the podcast up. Tonight, I am going to offer my rebuttal to Cody's Flat Earth theory. And it's basically going to be me ranting for about 30 minutes. And we don't have a formal debate structure here. See, normally I'd have like 5 minutes to talk, and then somebody would have 5 minutes to talk, and then two, and so on. We're not that organized. So I'm gonna start, and I'm presuming people are going to interrupt me off and on, and we're gonna try to get through my 10-page rant before sunup. So with that said, I guess we're going to kick it off. So, why is the Earth not flat? I am going to attempt to prove that the Earth is round using history, math, and a variety of gotcha questions that I swear are not meant to sound trite. With that said, let's begin. So first of all, we've got history. Now we've got Pythagoras, Aristotle, and let's see if I can say this right, Eratosthenes. Aristophanes, thank you. We got a variety of Greeks. They were proposing that the Earth was a sphere. We also have paintings from Bibles dating as far back as the 1300s. And this is important because this shows that there is no conspiracy talking that basically was implemented to create a round Earth model to demoralize the public or turn them against God or what have you. People have been debating about the round Earth for thousands of years. There have been competing models for a very long time, so the government did not facilitate the round Earth model. Now, this is important because when you're talking about the scientific establishment making nonsense up and trying to deceive the public, you can't just throw the accusation out there. There has to be other corresponding reasons for why you would think that. So when I'm complaining about neo-Darwinian evolution, I can tell you the historical characters involved, when they did what they did, why they did what they did. I can give you the political context for what they were doing. So just to kind of paraphrase it, a brief summation of what was basically going on was Alfred Russel Wallace and Charles Darwin were both working on a natural selection. And Russel Wallace told Darwin that he was about done with his book. Darwin went, oh crap, and asked Charles Lyell for help. And so Charles Lyell actually wound up helping Charles Darwin finish The Origin of Species. And then, of course, they took Russel Wallace's theory and Darwin's theory to this bunch of British academic snob guys. And the British Academic Committee chose Charles Darwin's book because their boss, Charles Lyell, helped him write it. And you also have to factor in that, William Wilberforce had gotten rid of the slave trade not too long before then. And essentially, evolution was a refutation of, I believe it was Paley's natural theology. And it was an attempt, I would argue, to justify imperialism. They were getting ready to start conquering other nations, and there's a whole bunch of political stuff going on that explains why the British academia justified or started pushing Darwin's version of natural selection rather than Russel Wallace's. Now, some of that may or may not be right or wrong, and people can bicker about whether or not I'm saying that right, but my point is that there are historical figures, and there is a context, and there is a story, and there is a narrative showing how evolution became popular in society. It's not just an ad hoc, if that's the correct terminology, it's not just a random explanation positing that evolution is just made up. There are political situations, there's historical documents that show kind of what was going on at the time. Also, I would take issue with the idea that all the photographs and everything that we've seen over the last 100 years is false. It's not enough to simply make the claim that stuff is made up. You have to have a reason to believe that that stuff is made up, other than I don't like what this shows me. So, for example, when I'm complaining about cavemen in neo-Darwinism. I can point to 2 specific examples to establish a precedent of the scientific establishment line, i.e. the Piltdown Man and the Nebraska Man, both of which were cases where people basically glued bones together, and then museums went so far as to build entire cavemen around single teeth. Like in the Nebraska Man's case, it was a pig's tooth glued to a chimpanzee skull. And then if that wasn't fake enough, the museum they sent it to built an entire caveman and his wife based on those single bone fragments. And so that's an example of a specific person doing a specific thing, and it's being verified that they lied. Now, as time has went on, I don't even, for myself, use those kinds of specific instances to suggest that they're lying about the cavemen. I attack their entire methodology at this point. So now they are basically, the guys that are positing cavemen ever so often are basically using phrenology in conjunction with measuring the cavity for the shape of the tongue. And if the skull is big enough and the tongue is shaped right, then they conclude that the bones they found are cavemen. Well, that's an entire methodological problem that I can argue that negates an entire class of cavemen that's come about in the last 100 years. Basically, phrenology is the measurement of the skull, and it operates under this idea that the shape of the skull, or maybe even the size of the skull, correlates with intellect. And in the 1800s, it was also kind of related to criminality. Well, that's nonsense. That was disproven years ago. In fact, you don't even have to have all of your brain to have intellect. There's lots of cases where people are missing large chunks of their brain and they're smarter than the population at large. So phrenology is a debunked science, and yet they're still using it to justify cavemen. So that's why I say the majority of the cavemen that are coming out today are false. So it's not just enough to accuse something of being false. You can't just look at a picture and go, I don't like that, it has to be fake. You have to have basically specific complaints that would lead you to conclude that they're fake, i.e. a historical figure that is said to have lied or glued bones together, or there's a general methodological problem that is creating these fake results, i.e. they're using phrenology to justify cavemen, only they've replaced the tape measure with cranium size and genetics. So that's important to understand. It's not enough to just say something is fake. You have to give specific reasons why it's fake. Now, point number C, motion. Why can't we feel ourselves spinning? Well, this is simply due to centrifugal force. When I was a wee child, we had a chicken farm, and I was a malicious little 8-year-old, so what I liked to do was I would put little chicks at the bottom of a 5-gallon bucket and then spin them over my head. And the reason I did this was because they stayed at the bottom of the bucket, and I thought it was hilarious. And it turns out I wasn't a mean little 8-year-old. I was a scientist, apparently, because that demonstrates centrifugal force. So, replace the chicks with, say, an inch of water. And then imagine you're the bacteria within the water. If you spin the bucket, then you're not going to feel the force. You are essentially the bacteria in the water. The bacteria aren't going to feel anything. You're not going to feel anything if the earth is spinning, because you are, in effect, in some respects, in a closed system. So because of the atmosphere and the fact that the earth is so large, you're not going to feel yourself spinning. The next point of that is, well, no, I'm going to move on to that here in just a second. So we're going to move on to the next point. So this is D. Clockwise and counterclockwise stars on the northern and southern hemisphere. I can't remember which is which. Sorry?
Can I stop you?
Yes.
Okay, so with the bucket example, it doesn't make sense to me because it's a different kind of spin. Because, like with that, you're within a closed container. So if you were saying like the Earth was a bubble and we were on the walls, that would make sense because we're getting pushed out.
Yeah.
But, or on a flat area like the bottom of a bucket, that would make sense. But
yeah,
that's a different. That would mean we would fling outward. We would go into the sky.
So you're saying the centrifugal force would actually throw us into space, not the other way around?
Yeah.
Okay. That is a good point. I don't think that's how that works, though. I think what you're forgetting is the fact that the reason I'm changing it over into water in a bucket is because the same phenomena happens with water. In the analogy, the water is the atmosphere, and we are the bacteria within the water. The water itself is being pressed down towards the bottom of the bucket, and the bacteria are moving independently regardless of the forces around it. Does that make sense?
But it's the opposite. Like the bucket is a closed container, but we don't have a closed container. We have a gradient.
Okay, explain what that means. I'm not sure what you mean by a gradient.
Our atmosphere is a gradient. It's a different layers of gases.
Yes, right? But that creates air pressure.
Allegedly.
That creates air pressure. It creates a bubble.
Yeah, but
that's
the force
a
is still
system.
opposite. It's still an opposite force.
Okay. Well, I think part of this can be accounted for with gravity, which I'm going to get to here in just a second, because this is really what we're talking about. The centrifugal force is pushing everything kind of together, but it's not just that. It's also gravity. And flat earthers, I believe, from what I researched, and bear in mind, I only looked at this for like a week, but from what I researched, they do acknowledge that this is a problem, which is why they deny the existence of gravity and resort to magnetism. There was two theories that I found. One was magnetism, the idea that you're in a magnetic vortex of some sort, and there's certain magnetic fields. The other was upward acceleration. Now, each one of those
I don't believe that.
I'm sorry?
I don't believe the upward acceleration thing.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was going to get to the problems of both of those here in a minute. Yeah. I have my cute little outline. But that, I think, what you're not taking into account with the centrifugal force is gravity. And so my point is, with the spinning, it's going to pull everything, with the spinning, I guess, and gravity, it's going to pull everything towards that central point. Because this was the confusing. So I guess we're moving on into gravity. And I'll skip the clockwise, counterclockwise hemisphere stuff, and let's just jump to gravity. And then I'll circle back to this stuff here in a minute. So, yeah, this is important to understand that gravity is not pulling you down in the respect that it's pulling you towards the bottom of space, because there is no bottom, right? It's pulling you towards a central point. And so it's basically everything is compressing together in certain islands. And so from our perspective, it feels like we're getting pulled down, but we're really not. We're getting pulled, towards a dot, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, dot in the middle of the sphere. So because of this, to counter the theory of gravity, they resort to magnetism. And the problem that I had with magnetism was what is magnetized and what isn't. That was the big issue. Why do you not have some objects shooting up into space and other objects coming down? What determines what is and isn't magnetized in this magnetism model? The other issue I had with this was orbits. Because in order for there to be an orbit, you have to have countervailing forces. So in both the magnetism model and the gravitational model, what's essentially happening is two forces are fighting each other, and that's what's causing the spin. And both will do that in both models. But my question with the magnetism thing was, okay, if we're operating from magnetism rather than gravity, and I might be wrong on this point, but I don't think I am. This was my intuition. I'm not a scientist, but this was the question that popped in my head when I was thinking through the problem. You've got the sun and the moon orbiting each other, right? Now, as the gravitational field weakens, they should be getting closer together, or one's got to start pulling one towards the other. So, for example, in order for this thing to work, the gravitational force has to be relatively similar at the beginning to get that initial spin, and then as the gravitational field weakens, which science, the astronomers claim that the Earth's magnetic field is weakening. As one of those fields is weakening, then the objects should be drifting closer together because there's not as much in the magnetism model. There's not as much force pushing them apart. Does that make sense? The moon's not being repelled as much as it was before. Does that make sense? Yes? No?
What's your question?
Well, this is not what we see. Under the magnetism model, the Earth and the Moon should be getting closer. But the Sun is moving further away from the Earth. The Earth is moving further away from the Sun, and the Moon is moving further away from the Earth.
Are you arguing like a claim that NASA says we're moving further away from the sun?
Yes, they've been tracking it. I don't know
magnetics?
which government institution is tracking it, but they have been claiming, they being the scientific community, that the Earth is moving away from the sun and the Moon is moving away from the Earth. Now, this makes sense under the gravitational model because the gravitational field is weakening and there is the red shift. So it makes sense for those bodies to be pulling apart. I don't understand how those bodies could be moving apart under a magnetic model. That's my question.
Okay. So the magnetic model is applied to the flat model. It goes hand in hand. So you shouldn't be applying the magnetic model to the space model. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, but it's not exactly what I'm saying. In order to have an orbit, period, you have to have opposing forces. In the gravitational model, that's gravity. In the flat Earth model, that's magnetism. But regardless, we're still seeing the same phenomena. I.e., the reason that they're saying the Moon is moving further away from the Earth is because by their measurements, the Moon is getting smaller. So from our perspective, it looks like it's moving away from us. How is that possible under a magnetic model?
I mean, I haven't seen any verification that the claim that the moon is moving further away is true.
Well, they're claiming it, and I'm defaulting to what they're claiming. So
they also
that's
claim the Earth
that's
is a
my
ball.
question. That's my question for them. So now again, there might be a rebuttal to this point because this magnetism stuff is quite technical, and I've heard the term magnetic vortex, and I have no idea what the mechanics of that are. My question for somebody in the flat Earth community, if they know, is how do orbits work in a magnetic model? Because they don't seem to work, as from what little research I've done after a week.
Yeah, why would you apply them? Like you're arguing a moot point because it
has to orbit in some way. I mean, the moon goes up and down on the horizon every night. So how does that work? From a magnetic model, what's that process? Like what's compelling the moon to follow its orbit? Like in the gravitational model, the Earth has a certain pull, the moon has a certain pull. Again, this is gravity pulling bits of debris into central points. Those pulls fight with each other, and those two celestial bodies start to spin. That's why you get an orbit, because it's two gravitational central points fighting with each other, essentially. Yeah. So how does that work with magnetism? What's the model for an orbit if it's magnetism? Okay. That's my question.
So you're talking about like because obviously from the flat Earth perspective, there's no planets in space and all that, right?
Right, but there still has to be a force pulling the celestial bodies apart.
So the firmament, I mean, I don't know what it is, but I'm guessing it's like a superfluid, and so it's like a hydrostatic, there's no friction in it.
Okay.
And so the sun and the moon are set in there, and I think it's like as the sun charges more, it becomes more of an electromagnet, and it pulls the moon, and the moon is magnetic.
So you're saying
it pulls more and less throughout the month.
Okay. Sorry, repeat that again. So you're saying the sun is pulling the moon?
Yeah, so the sun would be electric and the moon is magnetic. I mean, you get back into philosophy. That's just what it is.
Okay, so that's a whole other different thing. So what you're saying is there is a separate force that is an electrical force that is
the sun? Yeah, it makes everything grow. Like
it makes everything what? I'm sorry, it makes everything grow. So
it makes everything grow.
Okay. So I'll have to do more research.
That's your electric force.
I did mention that in my paragraph. I said that there has to be a different force, a third force that has to be doing something, because if it's just magnetism, those two bodies are going to be
Okay,
coming
yeah.
together. So if you
No,
have
yeah,
an
it's
electrical force,
electromagnetism.
if you have an electric force from the sun, maybe that's doing something. Again,
Yeah.
I've looked at it over the week. So for all of a week. So that's possible. I'm not saying it's right, but that's possible. The bottom line is you do have to have a third force. But I will note, I didn't come across anybody saying that, what you've said. So you're telling me this for the first time. I believe you, and I'm going to concede the point. But I'm just letting you know, I haven't heard that from anybody yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just doing my best here, man. But yeah, the sun is supposed to be electric, and the moon is magnetic, and so like, you can even apply this to relationships, like straight up. So like the man is electric, and so like when he does things, when he's like, doing stuff, she's magnetic. She magnetizes to him, right?
Okay.
So the sun is electric, and it pulls the moon, and you go through phases each month, and like so the sun is like gives out less of a charge, so it doesn't pull the moon, so the moon kind of drags behind a little bit, right? And so that's what the moon phases are. Why it gets further and closer away to the sun.
Okay.
Is that
So
magnetism thing you're asking about?
it doesn't answer all my questions. It does explain why the two bodies wouldn't gradually get closer together. The Earth and Moon wouldn't gradually get closer together. There's a third force pulling it.
It's a controlling force, huh?
Controlling force, third force. Magnetism is not the only thing at play. So it answers that question as to why they're not pulling together. It doesn't answer what I'm stating. Why are they moving? Why is everything moving further apart?
Everything moving further apart.
So why is the moon moving away from the Earth, and the Earth
Well,
moving away
that's a
from the
baseless
sun?
claim.
Well, you can say that, and I'm taking the position of the Matrix in this case. So it would be on you to refute it. They have measurements, like why you think it's fake. Basically, they have measurements that claim that everything's moving further apart. And I would say, how does that work under a magnetic model?
You said the distance, their measurement is based on the size of the moon?
It's not just that. I'm being simplistic. It's basically angular. It's triangulation. You know what I'm saying? So when you've got line A and line B, there's an angle. Well, if the moon is smaller and then it moves a little bit, well, that changes the angle. And based on the angle, they can conclude, based on the corner of the angle there, it's geometry. They can conclude that the sun and the Earth are getting moving
sticks
away.
And shadows.
What?
All the Aristophanes sticks and shadows that they did.
Yeah, it's the same model. It's the same concept.
Same
I mean, I don't know. It's one thing to say the flat Earth is true. It's another thing to discount all of geometry. But it's basic geometry.
I'm not discounting geometry.
Okay, well, it's the same. You had a tone, so I thought you were like discounting it. So
no, not at all.
no, okay. So that's
Geometry's
what they're
great.
claiming. Yeah, okay.
But the atmosphere is like it has water in it, right? There's air in the water. It's like a lens, and so based on how much water is in the air, can show you like changes in the size of the moon because the air is acting like a lens.
Well, that's fair, but they've been measuring this for 100 years.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
It's been consistently moving away, which is the problem. So, if it's consistently moving away over a course of 100 years, you can't use the lens and the refractal light to, say there's an illusion of some kind going on.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, okay. Well, I think I've chased that rabbit. This was kind of the magnetism thing was kind of technical. And there might need to be more work on that. So the next thing, I'm circling back to D. You got clockwise and counterclockwise stars. I don't remember which direction is which, but in one hemisphere they're going clockwise, in the other hemisphere they're going counterclockwise. I have heard people sit there and say it's a matter of perspective, and honestly, every flat earther that tried to refute this point, it was just bull crap. What they said didn't make any blasted sense as to how do you account for this, because the bottom line is when you're standing on a flat plane and you're looking straight up, it doesn't matter where on that plane you are at or which direction you are turned, those stars are going to look like they're going counterclockwise or clockwise. They're all going to be going one direction if you're on a plane. The only way to explain the clockwise and counterclockwise stuff on the hemisphere is to have a sphere or maybe a cube, but somebody has to be upside down. You have to like literally flip your point of view to get that effect. So there's clockwise and counterclockwise stars. The next point is North Star can't be seen in certain regions of the southern hemisphere. So North Star isn't visible, and there's different constellations in the southern hemisphere than there are in the northern hemisphere. So don't see how that's possible in a flat Earth model.
Okay. I think on our last episode I showed a video of this. We may have skipped over it though.
We did, but when I looked at people who tried to explain what we watched, they couldn't do it. That was the problem, because
It makes sense to me.
it didn't make sense to me when they tried to explain it. The guy I was listening to was Witsit. I don't know if you've heard of him. Witsit.
Yeah, Witsit's great. He's a little over my head sometimes. But.
Yeah, well, it might be what he's saying is not nonsensical rather than it being over your head. I don't like Professor Dave, but the guy was saying a lot of flashy terms, but he wasn't explaining the mechanics of it very well whenever I listened to him debate Professor Dave. Which I don't like Professor Dave because he's crud on the origin of life stuff. And James Tour kicked his teeth in that debate. But that's a whole other subject. Bottom line is he was okay. When he wasn't being snarky, he was okay on this subject.
Yeah.
But when Witsit tried to explain this perspective thing, in my opinion, he completely failed. Because I could not understand what in the world he was trying to say. It sounded like what he was saying was that there were just different... somehow the way that the stars turn changes depending on where you're at on the plane, but he didn't really explain how that was possible. And Professor Dave gave a very simple analogy. He was like, look, when you look straight up in a living room and you've got a clock and it's spinning clockwise, it's going to look as if it's spinning clockwise regardless of where you're at within the room. And it would be the same with the stars. If you're looking straight up and the stars are going clockwise, it doesn't matter where you are on the plane, those stars are going to continue to spin clockwise. And I listened to Witsit and tried to understand what he was saying, but I didn't feel like he really refuted the point. So, he kept saying perspective, but I have no idea what he meant when he said that.
Okay. I don't know. Well, what you said about the clock. I don't know if you can apply that because, in my head, so the firmament is like the North Pole is like at a 45 from the center. I think. No. I don't know how it works, man.
Well, that's part of the problem.
The stars look like if you do them on like a time lapse, the stars look like they're going like down at a 45-degree angle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. Mm-hmm. And so whenever you look at like Polaris and you've got that tunnel looking effect and then you turn around, it's the stars are going backwards.
Maybe we can look at that video that you were showing us again to try to demonstrate it, but I didn't understand what Witsit was saying on that point, and I thought that was a real problem.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also have to factor in the North Star thing. If the North Star is not visible, that means there's something obscuring the North Star.
It's just too far away.
Huh?
It's too far away.
Too far away?
Yeah, if you're at the tip of South America, like you're a long ass ways from Polaris.
Okay, well, what about the completely different constellations?
What do you mean?
Well, these guys claim that there are different groupings of stars in the southern hemisphere as opposed to the northern hemisphere. Like they have different stars. If you're in the north, you
won't be able to see them. They're too far away. Like the Southern Cross?
Perhaps. So you're saying that it's just distance?
Yeah.
Okay. Why would a telescope not affect that? Like if I were to take a telescope in the southern hemisphere, then wouldn't I be able to see the North Star then?
I don't know. I've never done it.
Okay. I would think it's a little convenient, but okay. All right, so they're too far away. All right, then. Here's my next point. Airplanes flying over the Pacific. I am sorry, but airplanes do fly over the Pacific. My dad works in tourism. There are flights over the Pacific Ocean. That is a thing. And I have not seen a flat Earth model that would explain how that's possible.
I don't even know what you're asking right now.
All
What do you
right. Well,
mean?
the way that these flat Earth models are, you've got basically Australia over on one end. I'm trying to do this with the camera. Australia is like on this side, and then you got Southeast Asia on this side, or you've got Chile on this side, or Southeast Asia on this side. And the flat Earth community seems to claim that you can't make flights over the Pacific Ocean, which I don't know why they would say that, because that happens constantly.
I don't know why they would say that either.
Yeah. So there's definitely flights over the Pacific Ocean. Now, that seems to be a problem with the models I've seen, because if you've got South America over here and you've got Southeast Asia over here, it seems like the distances would be greater, because in theory with the flat Earth model, they would be on opposite ends of the planet. Am I misunderstanding that? Like if they're on a plane and the plane isn't moving, then you've got to start at the far west in Southeast Asia, and then you've got to fly all the way to the far east to get to Chile. So you'd in fact be like, hypothetically, be doubling your distance. Am I wrong?
I don't understand what you're asking.
I'm saying that the flights would be much longer in time if they could happen at all. And I don't know why these flat Earth guys are claiming that you can't fly over the Pacific Ocean when there's lots of flights going over them all the time.
I mean, I don't know about anybody else's claim, but
it was in one of the debates I saw. The Quartering had a debate. Again, I think it was Whitsitt and Professor Dave. And they were saying that some people claim, or some flat earthers claim, that you can't fly over the Pacific Ocean when you clearly can.
Yeah, that's the one between us and the UK, right?
The Pacific Ocean? No, that's the Atlantic. The Pacific Ocean is California to Japan.
Okay. I mean, I don't.
Because the way that the flat Earth model is, they basically cut the Pacific Ocean in half and lay the whole planet out like this. So in that scenario, you'd have Southeast Asia over here, and then you'd have, let's say, Chile over here. So you'd have, hypothetically, yeah, Asia and Australia like on opposite ends of the planet by that model. That's the issue. So because of the way some of these models, and that's something I was going to get into, there's so many stinking models, they don't all say the same thing. So it's like hard to nail anything down. But according to at least some of the models, you would have Asia over here, and then you'd have Chile over here, and the plane would have to literally fly from one end of the planet to the other.
And how long does the flight take?
I don't know exactly. Typically, I think Dad's flight to New Zealand was something like 18 hours.
That's a long ass flight.
Yeah, it's a long flight, but I don't know if that's enough to account like that distance that they're claiming would be doubled on a flat Earth model.
And it's not? Are you saying it's not?
Yeah, well, what they were saying was that flights over the freaking Pacific don't even happen. Like, they don't exist. Which I was like, that's insane. Dad flies over, like, he's in tourism. He takes old people across the Pacific. So, I don't know why people would claim
I just think of it as part of, like, the Great Circle, you know? I mean, like, the Great Circle route, you know? It's like following the equator.
I don't know. They were just saying in some of these models, but again, that's part of my point, and I'll get to that at the end. But some of these models make it to where you can't even have flights over the Pacific. Like, they say it's impossible.
I don't know. That's silly.
Yeah, I don't agree with
I don't claim a model because I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I'm telling you, all the flat Earth models are crap, because the essential problem is they solve some anomalies and then they don't solve others. But
I don't know. Like the circle there. The circle makes sense, but the sun goes in an analemma,
I don't know
which
what
is a
that is. Well,
figure
I don't know
eight.
what that is. An
It's a
analemma.
figure eight.
How does it go in a figure eight?
It does. Like when planes have followed it, it goes in a
Okay.
big figure eight. And right at the that cross section where the points meet,
Uh huh.
that's summertime. That's when everything grows.
You'll have to explain that to me later because I that's a new point, and I'll have to see what you mean. But I'm gonna finish my spiel here, and I want you to
All right,
hold
go for it.
that thought because that is interesting to me. Well, let me ask you this first of all: could the tilt have something to do with that? The tilt of the Earth?
Um,
Because I would think if you've got those kinds of
I don't know.
variations, it would be due to a tilt in the planet going back and wobbling.
Look, this is an old feed or grain company.
Uh huh.
Get it?
Yeah, I
Like that
see it.
figure
I've
eight,
got
and then the
the
plant comes out of the middle of it.
yeah. You got the figure eight, and you got the corn. I don't know. That's
That's what
interesting.
that's all
I
about.
don't doubt that the sun. I'm going to take your word for it that the sun does a figure eight. I'm saying, even if it does, wouldn't the tilt of the Earth just as easily account for that?
Um, I don't know. Maybe I don't think about it
Okay.
like that.
Well, we'll move on. So, point G, 24-hour sunlight in the poles. The way that Whitsitt, and I think somebody else explained it, but I think it was Whitsitt mostly explained it, was you've got this rim effect. And essentially, the sun shines around the dome, and you get a ring of light at the edge of the dome.
Coffee cup caustic.
Yes, coffee cup caustic, he used that term. In my mind, there are several problems with this. Number one, it's not just 24-hour sunlight in these cycles. You get 24 hours of darkness. Now, if you've got light basically reflecting off the dome, that isn't going to go anywhere. And it doesn't matter where the sun is. As long as the sun is able to shine light on that dome, the dome's going to continue to have that ring of light around it. So there shouldn't be the 6 months of darkness on these poles. That doesn't make
Okay.
sense. Like if you
I can
can't
explain
use
that.
24-hour light to account for, you can't use this caustic to account for the 24-hour light and then ignore the 6 months of darkness.
Yeah, you can.
How? Because the sun's going to be shining around that dome,
Yeah,
transferring
but
that light no matter where
okay.
it's located.
So, there we go. Okay. So if the sun's going around a circle,
Uh-huh.
say my fingers are the equator,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the sun during the seasons, its path, it's going to get bigger and smaller. So that puts it closer and further away from the, I guess you'd say the firmament. So if it's up in the sky, if it gets too far away from the firmament, it's not going to reflect that light back into it, and that's the months of the year where it's going to be,
I
winter,
disagree. If you're
where
in
it's going to
any
be up in
proximity
the
of that
North Pole.
firmament, it's going to transfer the light because it's a prism. It shouldn't
Even if
matter
it's in the center?
amount. Like there isn't a scenario where you have so little light that it wouldn't be reflecting off the dome at all.
In the very center?
In the very center, it ain't going to be in the very center for 6 months. I mean, I would say no, it doesn't
No,
matter if it's
but
in the center, but even if it were, I mean that
like
doesn't account for the amount of time that it's dark.
the end of the it's like a spiral, like a upside down tornado. So like the sun is doing this. And
Well, you
the
got a
higher up it
whole other
gets,
problem if you do that because the closer you get to the dome on a plane, the more and more daylight you have throughout the entire planet. The higher up it gets, even if it's smaller, that beam is going to broaden, and so you're going to get more and more and more day. And then on not only that, the closer you get to the dome, then you're going to have more light starting up from the top, and that light's going to transfer down to the rim. And so it's going to get brighter and brighter and brighter. And so if you've got the sun closer to the plane, you're still going to have light because it's reflecting off the sides of the dome. If you go further up, it's still going to reflect off the top of the dome. I don't see a scenario where you get 6 months of darkness unless I just don't understand light at all. I don't see a
Is that what they
scenario where
say
the
in
coffee cup
Antarctica?
caustic would explain the darkness that you get for half the year.
Is that what they say? It's 6 months of darkness in Antarctica?
It might be 5 instead of 6. I don't remember the exact particulars, but in the North Pole, it's 6 months dark, 6 months light, and I'm presuming it's the same thing in the South Pole. They do say that there's a 24-hour sun in the South Pole, which the flat earthers don't believe. And there's like some billionaire guy saying, I'll take you down there to prove there's a sun. And I don't know if people are going or not, but
Yeah.
there's a whole thing with that. But
Yeah.
he
I'm
was
excited
just
about
talking
it.
about the light itself. And I'm like, well, if you're just talking about the light refracting and you don't even need the sun, fine. But how do you account for the periods of darkness then? Because they're cycles. Now, maybe it's a month instead of 6 months, but it's still the same problem. So how do you account for where the light's going for part of the year in this coffee cup caustic thing?
I mean, look, so this is conjecture, not conjecture. You could call this more spiritual than scientific,
Okay.
but so like this is the way the sun works is the story of Christ.
Okay.
So not to be sacrilegious or anything, but so like it says the sun in the last 3 days, like 3 days out of the year when the sun goes away, the deepest parts of winter, it goes into a cave for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Like so it goes up into like the very tip top, which could be like a tit kind of, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So in if you think about it like that, I mean, like, yeah, it could get out of, you know what I'm trying to say. You know,
I do
get where the
apologize.
light's
I am having a hard
not
time
reflecting
following.
out there.
Okay, sorry, say that again.
To get where the light's not reflecting out there, like it has that. I don't know. I don't feel like it would be that far out to say that.
I could be completely wrong. I could misunderstand how light works. But in my mind, if you're going to use the coffee cup caustic, then you've got a problem with the sun projecting light around that rim year round. And that's not what we see. That's the issue. And not only that,
I don't know.
if it's projecting light year round, heck, even if you couldn't see the light year round, you're still going to have issues with temperatures. It should not be that blasted cold if you're getting perpetual sunlight. And this is also a broader problem with the dome model, because I would like to know how they explain the greenhouse effect then, because if you've got a dome, and I mean, I suppose this dome could be astronomically large, and maybe that's the case, but when you've got a sun that's basically a nuclear bomb that's producing heat exponentially, and then it's in an enclosed capsule, then that heat is going to get absorbed by the glass. And the bottom line is you're going to get a more evenly dispersed temperature throughout the dome. It's the greenhouse effect. It's quote-unquote global warming.
No.
All right. Explain why I'm wrong.
Because the sun isn't that kind of energy. It's not like a heat lamp. It's like a convection oven. It's like a microwave.
Well, it doesn't matter. The heat's heat, and it's going to get trapped by
No,
that
that's
dome.
not true.
Why not?
That's not true. Because you can stick like different things heat up differently in the sun. So it's like it's radiation. It's not direct heat.
It doesn't make a difference what kind of heat it is. If that heat gets trapped in a dome, that heat is going to get transferred throughout the air, and that's going to create more even temperatures. I don't know what difference it would make the kind of heat.
It's a superfluid. There's no conductor inside there.
Okay, well then a superfluid then. It doesn't matter. You're still going to have heat trapped under the surface.
When you turn your microwave on,
Uh-huh.
does it heat up the entire inside of the microwave?
No, it doesn't.
No.
But it does transfer the heat directly into the object.
No, it radiates it.
Okay. Still, the food's hot.
Yeah.
And if you allow that heat to go on long enough, it will raise the temperature of the air in the microwave. That's going to produce an effect. No, it's not going to be right away, but that heat changes to kinetic eventually. And the second it changes to a kinetic kind of heat, it's just going to transfer out into the air. So you're still going to have the same problem.
But it doesn't. What do you mean?
I mean, when you have heat and you've got a dome over it, to my mind, that heat has nowhere to go. Like in the round Earth model, that heat is in part escaping into space. So you're losing some of the heat at all times. But if you've got a sun and it's in an enclosed dome, where is the heat going? It shouldn't matter what kind of heat it is,
It gets
because
turned into energy.
the kind of heat changes dependent on the medium. So I don't see how that would make a difference. The heat has to go somewhere. And so it's just like, why you would put a dish over a roast beef. It keeps it hot longer because it traps the heat. Well, if you've got a sun under a dome, presumably that heat's going to be trapped and it's going to keep burning and burning and burning and burning. Where's the heat eventually going? Like, is there space on the other side of the dome and the heat's being lost that way? Is it like what are the mechanics? Because you've got a problem with seasons. And to my mind, if you've got something burning and hot under a dome, that's going to transfer heat more evenly, and you're not going to have such dramatic seasons. It's the greenhouse effect. That's why Ken Hovind and the creationist guys would say that the planet was tropical for so long, because there was a canopy over the Earth. It was trapping the heat, increasing the air pressure and the oxygen levels, and creating a completely different environment. That's why the liberal guys are freaking out about global warming, because they're claiming the clouds can trap the heat and it's going to melt the coast and we lose New York, which, but that's the problem, is heat gets trapped in the atmosphere. Well, in a dome model, I mean, I'm assuming this dome is huge, but where's the heat going? Especially if there's no space.
Well, that's two different models of sunshine, buddy. So the space model, it's a gas giant, right? So that's direct fire heat. Like, that's fire heat.
I think it's nuclear
right?
fusion.
Well, they say it's gas, right?
If I tried to talk about it, I'd just be showing I'm an idiot. From what I
Well, I
understand,
mean, this
it's
is
some
the
kind
crux of the
nuclear
argument right
reaction,
here.
and that's about as far as my knowledge goes.
Is it fire or induction?
It's not fire, because fire requires oxygen. It's a chemical reaction more than it is anything. That's why it's nuclear fusion. It's a whole other model.
Would the sun burn your skin?
Yes.
Like, if you touched it, would it like burn your skin the same way fire would?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's like a thermal heat, right? That's a direct heat.
Mm-hmm.
You can get too far away from it. A microwave, you're being radiated. It's like microwaves. Okay? So it's like wireless energy, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to burn your skin, though.
Well, it's different. You're being radiated from the inside out. It's not thermal heat.
Okay, but
it's two different kinds of sunshine.
The end result is still going to be thermal heat, though.
No.
Why not? I mean, your food is hot.
Think about a microwave. That's how the sun works.
Yes, but Cody, your food is still hot when you're done with the microwave. So you're still getting heat produced in the food. It doesn't matter,
But it got heated up from the inside out.
Yeah, fine, but the heat still has to go somewhere, and if you leave it in the microwave, it's going to change the temperature of the air inside the microwave.
The thing inside it will, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. So you've got this. It doesn't matter what kind of heat it is, because
everything's
the heat,
balanced.
Huh?
Everything's balanced. That's the whole thing. So like, radium, radon, iridium. What do you want to call it?
I don't know.
The nuclear power shit.
Okay.
What do you call it? Radium?
What are you trying to identify? I'm not sure.
It's like an orange rock, right? And it just gets super hot.
There's uranium, plutonium.
Okay, yeah, uranium.
Okay.
Okay, so basically nuclear power is they take one of those rocks, they put it in a pot of water, and they run the plant off of that steam.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's not a lot of things in this Earth that will do that, right? That will hold that. They won't capacitate that much energy. And so most things won't. But like that's what's going on is like that rock. It's a major capacitor for the sun.
Okay, I mean, I still don't see how that changes what I'm asking. Like that doesn't change the problem.
There's no if
Like, I'm not saying that the Earth's going to boil and the oceans are going to boil under a flat Earth model. I'm saying
the thing
that
you're
you've got
saying
too
is-
much temperature variation in a closed system. The heat should be getting more evenly dispersed if there's a dome over everything.
more evenly dispersed. No, because it's radiated heat. It's not thermal energy. It's not going to rise to the top
It's
and then
still
come back
being
down.
transformed into thermal energy. It may start out as radiated heat,
Yeah, but
the
everything
water
burns it.
eventually boils. The noodles eventually get
Right.
hot. That heat
Right.
still goes somewhere. So
No, those
if
things-
it still goes
those things-
somewhere, where is it going in the dome model?
The heat is functioning as the energy. Like when you noodle boil, when you boil noodles, the energy is going into hydrating those noodles. That's where it goes, bro. That's where the heat goes.
Yes, but you still have energy escaping the noodles when the problem is done. It is escaping is kinetic heat, and that heat has to go somewhere. If you boil water long enough, you will raise the temperature of the entire kitchen. So it doesn't matter. Like it's just why you get hot cooking in an oven. Like it's the same stinking problem. So where is the heat going on the freaking flat
The
Earth
sun-
model? If there's a dome, it's enclosing everything. The temperature should be still more evenly dispersed.
Okay,
Why do
think
you
about it
have
like this.
negative 120
The sun-
degrees on the flippin' Antarctica or the ice wall or whatever it is, and then you have the Sahara? How do you get that in a
I have
flat dome,
something for
in a
you.
dome model? Because the
something
heat
for
is
you.
trapped.
So, what you're saying is, I think you're saying we would have this problem if it weren't for microwave switches. So, if you leave open the microwave, it would heat up the whole kitchen if you turn it on. If you had that switch, jerry rigged a little
Yeah.
bit.
Okay. Let me change the analogy
kidding.
for you. Let me help
Obviously.
you. Let me give you a different analogy. Say you have a giant
Different kind of
ass
heat, man.
microwave outside. It's like the size of a skyscraper, and you boil noodles the size of a bus, and you stick those noodles in an office building. Those piping hot boiling noodles are going to raise the temperature of the office building because it's still an enclosed space.
Because you have transferred the radiant energy into thermal energy. already.
Correct. But even once it's transferred into thermal energy, you're still going to have, like, the sun is heating the other objects on the earth up.
Are you saying it's like the dome model is impossible because we would all cook to death?
No, I'm saying that the seasons we see are impossible because the heat should be more evenly distributed.
Seasons we see are impossible because the heat should be more evenly distributed.
In a dome model, how do you prevent a global warming type scenario with the dome model? How do you not have a tropical Earth? Or why do
How
we
do you
have
prevent
like
it in
as
a ball
extreme
model?
temperatures in certain parts of the planet but not others? How does that work? What are the mechanics of that? How big is the dome? How small is the dome? Like how does
I don't
the
know.
temperature distribution work in a dome model?
It's the distance that the sun or the microwave bulb is away from the thing.
Yes, but
And
again,
when it's local, that makes sense. When it's far away, that doesn't make sense.
okay, we're going to get to that. You said something very interesting, and I've got a point later on in this thing that addresses
Y'all keep
just
looking
that.
at the sun like it's 300 damn million miles away and confusing the shit out of yourselves.
No. No, I understand that they think that the sun is smaller and closer. I get that. But my point is you've got problems no matter what the size of it is or how far it is under a flat Earth model. That's the issue. You've got and that's why there's so many models.
The issue is you keep trying to put a model on it.
Yes, you need a model. You need a model. That's a hypothesis. You need a model to explain all the phenomena.
Yeah.
And they can't agree on a model because every model explains some scenarios, but not others. So for example, these guys can't even agree on whether or not the sun is under or over the dome. They argue about that. Well, if it's above the dome, how the heck do you get the tides? If it's under the dome, how do you have seasons? How do you have the seasons that we have? Like, what happens with the heat? How does that work? What are the mechanics of that? You've got problems with every model, and nobody can agree on how to solve them. That's where I'm going with all of this. Is every scenario solves some problems, but not others. So we're probably gonna have to drop that now because we've been on it for like 15 minutes. So, all right. So we've covered the light cycle and the seasons. We've covered gravity and magnetism. Redshift. Okay.
My favorite.
Yeah. So redshift. I've explained this before. It's basically same thing as like sound. When a truck is passing you get this. It's because the sound waves are closer together and they stretch further out as time goes on. And so because light does the same thing, and red is more stretched out light waves, blue closer together light waves, this implies motion with the stars. But even if it didn't imply motion in the stars, it would imply depth. So, are the stars above the dome? Are they under the dome? How much depth is there? How does the flat Earth model account for the red shift? Because first and foremost, I don't know how in the world you can create a red shift model without saying that the stars are moving. And furthermore, if the moon is moving away from the Earth, and from the biblical standpoint, in what sense are the sun and the moon and the stars fixed if they're moving? So, food for thought, but either way, how do you account for space not being real if there's depth among the stars?
I don't know.
That's the problem with the red shift. The red shift shows that there has to be some kind of space even above the dome.
I mean, I guess. But you could also say that's like, I don't know, camera stuff. I mean, like...
Camera stuff.
Yeah, like lenses not focusing and all that kind of thing.
Lenses not focusing is not going to create a red shift. That's not how that works.
Man, I don't know. I think all that shit's stupid.
You got a problem with the red shift. The red shift creates an issue. So there's that. Let's see what's next.
I think it's pointless hermeneutics or whatever that word is.
It's not hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the scripture of the Bible. Like, it's studying the Bible scriptures. This is like the red shift. These are guys trying to disprove the Bible. All right. Okay, so we've already covered that. I'm actually going to wait on that. Okay, now I wanted to make a quick commentary on Bible verses. And I need to read this pretty close to verbatim, even though my speech is like full of errors. So, the verses are being misunderstood thanks to poor literary criticism. You are failing to take into account the context around the verses. And it's a bad idea to use poetic passages to make a scientific claim, since the poetic language is meant to convey vivid imagery and emotion. The point is to communicate an idea, not make a factual claim about science. So, for example, Psalms compares God to a hen protecting its chicks. The Bible is not saying God is a chicken. The Bible is saying that God nurtures his children in the same way that a mother nurtures her children. It is imagery meant to communicate an idea. And the major and minor prophets, Psalms, Revelations, Job, they all do this, which is why it is very dangerous to make scientific claims. If you were to try to use the Bible to prove that the earth is flat, You would need to use books like Chronicles and Judges, historical narratives, things like that, just to demonstrate the point. And we can look at these if you want, but we don't have to because that's going to be a rabbit hole, but we can look at them if you want. These are 3 verses I found that could at least be put in the running to be considered for like legitimate passages that might say there's a flat earth. I haven't read them because I wanted to react to them for the first time with you. But if we do that, before we do that, first of all, let me say what they are. So you've got 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 30. 1 Samuel chapter 2. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 8. 2 Samuel 22, verse 8. So we can look at those if you want to. But my point is, you have to use that kind of historical narrative type stuff to even make a claim that it's saying something scientific. The books like Psalms and Major and Minor Prophets and all that uses too much poetic imagery. You can't adequately defend the idea that it's making a scientific claim. But there's something to bear in mind, and this gets into hermeneutics or exegesis or eisegesis or one of those fancy theological terms, whichever one it is. Now, this is important to understand. First of all, even if they're in these books, if it's a simile, like Psalms, where it's comparing God to a hen protecting its chicks, that's a simile. If it's a simile, still has to be disregarded. If it's part of a vision, still has to be disregarded. And there is an even more subtle point. So, just because a biblical character says something, that does not mean that the Bible or God is making that claim. So, for example, in Judges, there is a couple who sees an angel, either an angel or an Old Testament vision of Christ. Either way, they see the angel and they freak out and they say, "Oh my gosh, here's an angel, now we're going to die." They believed that if they caught a glimpse of the divine or something divine, they would die. Obviously, this is false. It doesn't happen. The angel gives them a vision and the story moves on. But just because they said they were going to die doesn't mean that that's true. And obviously, we know that's not true because the rest of the story happens. So just because a character says something does not mean it's literally true. And it's a bad methodology anyway. So let me give you another example. Like, this doesn't just apply to science. It applies to, like, ethics. So David had a particularly murderous military commander, named Joab. Joab murdered 2 individuals, Abner and Amasa. Now, rather than punishing Joab for these murders as soon as he learned about them, David waits until he is about to die, then tells Solomon to deal with Joab, which he does, when Adonijah tries to make a bid for the throne, tries to take the throne from Solomon or get the throne before Solomon can get the throne. Joab joins that movement and Solomon kills him because of that. Now, the Bible does not say whether or not David did the right thing. And it does not say that the Almighty is telling you that when somebody commits a murder, you have to wait until the proper time, then give the charge to kill somebody to somebody else so you don't get your hands dirty. It's not making a moral claim. It's simply saying what David did. Now, you can make an inference from that story, but you can try to draw like a lesson from that story, but that lesson is an inference. It's your interpretation of that story. It's not morally authoritative. So just because a person says something in the scriptures, that does not mean that the Bible is making that claim. Otherwise, you would have to say everything David did in his reign was right, which it clearly wasn't, or at the very least, it's debatable. So does that make sense? That's the problem with using the Bible verses, because you've got a lot of context and different things that have to be weighed before you can determine that the Bible's making a scientific claim.
Yeah.
So that was a long diatribe, but I felt like that needed to be said in light of our conversation last time. So, everybody good? Any thoughts?
No.
Okay. In that case, we're moving on.
I thought you were going to read your verses.
No, I was leaving that up to you. If you wanted to read them, we could, but we don't have to.
Do you have them up?
I don't have them up. No, I don't think it would be a big deal to pull them up, but I don't have them up.
I'm afraid of pulling anything up because I always close out my screen and then it ruins the whole stream.
Well, I could do it if you want. I mean,
You want
if
me to
you
do it?
want. Trevor, you do it. Like,
What was it First Chronicles? What?
yeah, well, they're just 3 verses. I don't think we need to do screen share on 3 verses. Yeah, it was First Chronicles 16:30. 16 chapter 16 verse 30 is the first one.
$16.30. I feel like I know that verse.
Yeah, that's a pretty famous one.
I haven't read it. My money
Chronicles.
is something about foundations of the earth. Which is an analogy, but we'll see if I'm right.
So First Chronicles 16 verse 30, right?
Yes.
Yep.
This is from the King James Version. Fear before him all the earth, the world also shall be stable, that it be not moved.
Yeah, so you talked about that one last time.
Yeah.
So we had a debate about the word stable and moved and all of that. Trevor, just for demonstration, can you read like the verses, let's just say like 10 verses before and 10 verses after, just to give us an idea of what's being talked about?
Hang on, let me.
Yep.
I was gonna try and pick a different version, or do you want me to just stick with King James?
Whatever you want to do, man. Doesn't
King
really
James is
matter.
fine.
Yeah. King James is fine.
Okay. So. Alright, I'm just gonna start from the beginning of 16.
Cool.
First Chronicles 16.
Cool.
So they brought the Ark of God, the Ark of the Covenant,
Okay.
and set it in the midst of the tent. David had pitched for it, and they offered burnt sacrifices and peace offerings before God. Verse 2. And when David had made an end of offering the burnt offerings and the peace offering, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord. And he dealt to everyone all of Israel, both man and woman, to everyone a loaf of bread, and a good piece of flesh, and a flagon of wine. And he appointed certain of the Levites to minister before the ark of the Lord, and to record, and to thank and praise the Lord God of Israel. Asaph, the chief, and next to him Zechariah, Jeiel, and Shemiramoth, and Jehiel, and Mattathiah, and Eliab, and Benaniah, and Obededom, and Jeiel, psalteries, and with harps. Oh, so those are instruments. Okay.
Yeah.
But Asaph made a sound with cymbals. So it's a party, basically,
Yeah.
if I'm getting it right.
Yeah, you're right.
So, verse 6, Benaiah also and Jehaziel, the priest with trumpets, continually before the ark of the covenant of the God. Then on that day, David delivered first the psalms to thank the Lord in the hand of Asaph and his brethren. Give thanks unto the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people. So this is David speaking one of his psalms.
Yeah.
Sing unto him, sing psalms, So David would be singing right now.
Yeah.
Oh, so the verse is actually a psalm?
Yep.
Yes.
It's the beginning
Wow,
of a psalm.
that's funny.
It
Yeah.
turned into a psalm. This is verse 9. Sing unto him. I'm not singing, by the way. Sing
Oh, come
psalms unto him. Talk ye of all his wondrous work. Glory ye in his holy name. Let the heart of them rejoice. Seek the Lord. Seek the Lord and his strength. Seek his face continually. Remember his marvelous work that he hath done, his wonders and the judgments of his mouth. O ye seed of Israel, his servant, ye children of Jacob, his chosen one. He is the Lord our God, his judgments are in all the earth. Be ye mindful always of his covenant, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations. Here's verse 16, which is the one we're talking about,
Yep.
in the middle of David's song.
Yep.
Even of the covenant which he made with Abraham, and of his oath unto Isaac, and hath confirmed the same to Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying unto thee, will I give the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance. Is that good? You want me to keep going?
No, you're good. So obviously the fact that it's a psalm immediately makes you realize
Discounts
it's
it
poetic
in your
narrative.
brain, right?
Huh?
Yeah, it was David singing.
Yeah, it's David singing. So, like
Well,
that.
and they always hide the truth in songs. So
Yeah, well, again, this goes back to what I'm talking about before, though, about it could be that David believed in a flat Earth model. You know what I'm saying? Like he could have believed like whatever they believe about the Earth at the time. That's fine. That doesn't mean the Bible's making that claim or God is making that claim. It could just be their culture.
okay.
That's part of the problem.
What's the next one?
It was, hang on a minute. Let me minimize this because I pulled up Bible Gateway. Next one was 1 Samuel 2, chapter 2, verse 8.
1 Samuel. So, you want me to just read it?
Sure, go for it.
1 Samuel 2:8, King James Version. He raiseth up the poor out of the dust, and lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes, and to make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them.
Is that all the chapter? Is that the entire chapter? Give me the full chapter. Oh, there
No,
we
that's
go.
just the verse. That's just
Yeah,
verse 8.
yeah, and so it's the same thing. It's a psalm. Again, I have not looked these up. I didn't know these were going to be prayers and psalms and poetic literature kicking in. I swear to you, I didn't know. I literally chose to not look at them just to make my point. And if I got screwed, I got screwed. But that's two verses that demonstrate exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So every time they do this, it's poetic narrative, unless it's not that way with the last one. But that's 2 out of 3 so far. That's been poetic literature.
Yeah. One
Okay.
was just
That's my point.
One was a song, the next one was a prayer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what's the
Always
last
had the
one?
truth in
Do
the
we wanna
songs,
move
man.
on?
Prayer.
It's like on YouTube, you can get away with saying some pretty heinous shit as long as it's like in a song.
Yeah. Yeah.
So same kind of story, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Snoop Dogg,
If
at least I
if
hope,
the-
hasn't actually beaten, well, I'm not even going to go there.
if the Bible's been censored and manipulated like I say it has, then I mean the truth being in the songs, it lines up with the current vernacular of society.
The truth being in the songs, it lines with the current vernacular side. It might be the truth, but all you can really say definitively is that what they believed. That's what they believed.
What's a vernacular?
Well, like what the way that society, so like, like history is painted by the victor, right? So like,
Yeah.
history is going to look how they want you to see, like, the news. Like, how do you think they're going to put COVID in the history books? They're going to put it down as like this awful pandemic that killed millions of people, and in all reality, it wasn't
No,
that.
because we're gonna win and we're gonna throw Fauci's butt in jail.
No, this will, dude. Trump is like the father of the vaccine, allegedly. So
Have you heard the story behind that? It was
no,
Pence.
but let me finish my point.
It was Pence.
So-
Pence wrote a book bragging about it.
He's still bragging about it.
Yeah, it was Pence. It was Pence the whole stupid time. He's the one that introduced Fauci to Trump, and yeah, it was Pence being the puppet master.
But he's still bragging about it, and Pence is out of the picture.
Yes, Trump is a stubborn buller. That doesn't mean he was the mastermind. Trump is absurdly arrogant.
Dude.
For all his flaws. For all his good qualities, he's arrogant.
I know.
And he's not
It's ridiculous.
wanted to admit that he was wrong about the vaccine. That is wholly different than being the mastermind behind the vaccine.
I don't know, dude. I know that everything we see on the news is bullshit, and that's all the shit that they write down.
You're right.
That's all the shit that they write down.
So I don't know what your point is. I'm assuming
My point is, the Bible is the history of that time. So if we're gonna extract the truth out of it, we need to use discernment and read between the lines a little bit.
I agree. That's what I'm teaching you to do.
In the Bible?
Yes. I'm literally showing you literary criticism. That's what it means to read between the lines.
But you said it's infallible.
It is infallible, but that doesn't mean you don't use literary criticism. You have to bear in mind the context, who's talking, why they're talking, the culture they were in. And you have to suss out the truth with all those factors when you're reading a verse. You can't read Proverbs the same way you read the epistles. They're not the same kind of book. They're different genres. The epistles are not Leviticus. Leviticus is not Chronicles. They are different types of books.
What are you saying?
I'm saying that what the church does and what the church gets wrong is, to use a very simple analogy, is they will take a romantic comedy and call it sci-fi. And then because they're misidentifying the genre of the story they're reading, they screw up the meaning of the texts. That is a very crude, simplistic analogy. But for example, with the epistles, Paul is not trying to give the Gentiles their own separate law. He is trying to show them how to apply the Levitical law in a Gentile context. The entire British system of law is based on the methodology Paul used in the epistles, that and Cicero, and like the Romans. So, but what the church gets wrong is they will look at the epistles and they will try to treat them like the Levitical law itself, like Paul was writing a completely new law. So, for example, when Paul is saying it is a shame for man to have long hair, the typical literalist person will sit there and go, oh, I'm not supposed to have long hair, conveniently ignoring the fact that according to scholars, Paul was in the middle of a Nazarene vow when he wrote that, and he had long hair himself when he wrote that verse. The word shame in that time was a cultural shame, not a moral decree. And it wouldn't make any sense to say that it's morally a sin to have long hair, because why would having long hair be included in a Nazarene vow? That's the same vow Samson had, and Paul would have known about Samson. So it doesn't make any sense for shame to be a synonym with sin in that verse, because you have other historical passages that tell you kind of what Paul meant. Paul was drawing a parallel with their culture and then applying a certain aspect of the Levitical law or spiritual principles in relation to their culture. So he was taking the Levitical law and he was trying to show them how to apply it from their point of view. Does that make sense?
And they threw him in jail for it.
I'm sorry?
And then they threw him in jail because they didn't understand it.
Who threw who in jail?
Paul.
Yeah, the Romans threw Paul in jail because they considered him yeah, that's a whole other thing. So, yeah.
I'm still a little lost on your point here.
My point is that's textual criticism. If you're a literalist in the traditional sense, quote unquote, you just look at it, you just look at the verse, it is a shame for man to have long hair, and you conclude it's a sin to have long hair. But you're ignoring what the word shame actually means. You're ignoring the fact that Samson had long hair, and it's part of a spiritual covenant that God set up. So how could having long hair be a sin? Yeah. And you're ignoring the fact that Paul had long hair, which is cultural, like historic context. And you're ignoring the fact that Paul is a Pharisee and would have known about Samson, because presumably since he was a Pharisee, he would have read Judges. That's bearing in mind the author of the text. And so you have to take all these different factors, you have to consider them when interpreting a scripture, not just look at the scripture at face value. Paul is a Pharisee. He would have known about Samson. It doesn't make any blasted sense for him to be condemning long hair when one of the most famous people had a covenant that God had set up that ordered him to have long hair. That doesn't make sense. So how in the world could Paul be condemning having long hair? Doesn't work. And so you have to bear in mind the other books, in this case, Judges. Judges being part of the Old Testament, which Paul would have known. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you have to take other clues in order to appropriately understand what a scripture means. But they take a scripture like it's a shame for man to have long hair, and they compare it to Proverbs 5. They want to read it just like Proverbs 5, which says, don't sleep with an adulteress. They want to make it a direct moral decree when Paul is not making a direct moral decree. He's talking to a church, giving a specific example about it, talking about a completely different thing and using the long hair deal as an example. Does that make sense? You have to bear in mind the context of the story. You can't just cherry pick a scripture and make a moral law out of it or make a scientific claim out of it. It's like the news media cherry picking a quote from a politician. It's the same thing. And what these quote unquote literalists are really doing is they're just cherry picking scriptures. They're quote mining. It's no different than what a reporter does to a politician. Same thing, but they're not bearing in mind the context of the words. That's what's going on with this.
So there are no relevant Bible verses about the flat earth?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. There's, like they say, I think it's around 200.
What about Genesis?
Genesis doesn't say anything about a flat earth.
And
the thing about Genesis is you've got Genesis is hard. Firmament. Huh?
Genesis is hard. It literally says firmament.
Okay, but that's not an affirmation of the flat earth. We don't exactly know what firmament means.
The waters
It could have meant clouds, dude.
Man, that don't make no sense.
How does it not make sense? If it's an overcast, for example, it makes perfect sense.
Well, you have to
if
think
Kent
about it in the
Hovind's theory about the canopy
time,
is
Gary.
right, it makes sense. Huh?
You have to think about the context of the time. Why would they call clouds water?
Because it rained. When there was clouds, it rained.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it did. When at the time they wrote Genesis?
It clearly says in Genesis. Well, at the time, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But
when they wrote it rained.
The water only came from the ground back then.
Yes, that might very well be true, but when they wrote it, clouds caused rain, and so they would have said the clouds were water.
No.
And that's not even technically, if you want to be scientific about it, that's not even technically right. Clouds are like mostly dust. They're like half rain, half dust. They're like a mixture of things.
Yeah. So
but from their perspective, they would have thought the clouds were water.
You want me to read?
Yeah, we can do the last one. I went ahead and looked ahead though, and it's just based on the way it's broken up, it looks like it's another prayer. Yeah, David sang to the Lord the words of this song when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies, from the hand of Saul. He said, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress, and so on. According to the literalist, Cody, that means God literally has to be a rock. He is a rock in some random field. It's like there's no room for poetry. None.
We can't agree that David was a flat earther for sure.
Maybe. Like what Whitsitt said was that the Hebrew priests or the scholars at the time believed there was a flat earth. And that might very well have been true. Now, I don't think that can apply to Genesis and the Torah, because when that was written, there were no Hebrew scholars. They were still in the wilderness when those books were written. But at David's time, sure, he may very well have believed in the flat earth. That doesn't mean he was right. And that doesn't mean the Bible's making the claim.
It could be on a spinning bowling ball in space.
It could be on the backside of a fairy wing. It doesn't matter.
Or a turtle.
And we're going to just make random scenarios. We're just like Christmas ornaments on some ogre's tree.
So you agree that the space analogy and the balls are ridiculous?
No, I'm being stupid. So I wanted to make that point about the scriptures, and I think we've definitively shown it's more often than not these scriptures are part of prayers and poetry.
All right. So what was your next thing?
So I had final thoughts about section 1, which is to say why the earth isn't round. And then I have a positive, why the earth isn't flat, and then I have a positive case for why the earth is round. So I broke it up into two halves. So here's my final thoughts on why the earth isn't flat.
I can bounce back on final thoughts. I can go back with your spin thing.
Go back
The
with the
centrifugal
spin
force
thing.
deal.
Oh, okay.
He's spinning.
Well, let me finish my closing statement and then do your centrifugal force thing.
Oh, yeah, for
and
sure.
We can go back and forth. So, final thoughts. Largest problem is that I can see the largest problem that I can see with the flat Earth model we just talked about. There is no model. The problem with the flat Earth model is there is no model. There's like 15 dozen models, and they can't agree on anything.
Sure.
The dome seems to be necessary, but there seems to be some debate about what the dome is made of, and nobody can determine if the sun and the moon are over the dome or under the dome. Furthermore, there doesn't seem to me to be any scale with the models. Like, we don't know how big the flat Earth is. We don't know how long the perimeter of the ice wall is supposed to be. Like, there's no, like, I'm not even sure what Antarctica is. Is Antarctica the ice wall? Does it exist at all? I have no clue because these models can't agree about what it is. And so, yeah, you've got that issue. They can't explain the night cycles in northern and southern poles. We had that big debate about the coffee caustic. Was it coffee cup caustic?
Yep.
And that's the big issue. So my next problem is that there is no definitive story that it shows how the world at large came to decide that we needed to use a round Earth model to demoralize the public. This brings me back to my parallels of evolution. When I am refuting evolution or arguing about neo-Darwinism, I can give you historical context and give you an approximate story, maybe not 100% right, maybe I've got details wrong, but I can give you an approximate story that shows the characters and the people involved who pushed the theory, and I can tell you how the theory became popular. I can tell you what went wrong. There's nothing like that with the round Earth model. If the flat Earth is true and the round Earth is some kind of agreed upon lie, how did that lie get propagated? How did people come to agree to tell that lie? You have to bear something in mind. And this is going to start out as a fallacy of consensus, or a consensus fallacy, but my point's a little more nuanced than this. You have got businesses, governments, entire industries, citizens, millions of people all claiming the earth is round. Now, that's the consensus fallacy, but the thing you have to bear in mind is these people have counter interests. There are 9 countries that claim that they've been to the moon. There are countless businesses and industries that say they've seen the curvature of the earth from the upper atmosphere. And these people hate each other. Russia and the United States hate each other. There's no reason for them to want a round earth over a flat earth. It doesn't make any sense. These people They have every reason to argue with each other, and yet they're in agreement on this point. And there would be a financial incentive. Can you imagine if, let's say, Pakistan was like, them dad blame Westerners have been lying about the earth being round this whole time. It's flat. Get on our rocket and we'll show you. If the earth was actually flat, they would have every reason to demonstrate that to people to countervail the lying, dirty West. So you've got people that really have every reason to mess each other over, all in agreement on this point. You've got people with countervailing interests, private space agencies and government space agencies, all both saying that the earth is round. Now, wouldn't the private agency be able to financially profit from saying that? Dad blame government's lying. The earth is flat. It ain't round. Get in my rocket and I'll show you. Why don't they do that? So you've got
The Pakistanis?
Hmm?
The Pakistanis specifically?
No, I'm
Because
just
they're
saying,
being
this is
genocided
just
by
people
Israel.
in general. If you've got people with countervailing motives, like that hate each other, why would they all get into agreement over a lie if they don't even like each other on everything else?
Because it makes money. Lies make
But
money.
the flat earth would make money. That's my point. If somebody were
wouldn't,
to
'cause it's the
challenge the
truth.
consensus and show photographic proof, it would make money.
No, it wouldn't.
What? How? In what universe would? If somebody came up to me and was like, "I can prove that the Earth is flat. Get in my rocket ship and I'll show you," I'd be like, "Sign me up and take my money. I want to see this." And a lot of people are like that. I don't think I'm alone. I think you'd go. I don't even believe in the flat Earth. I'd want to go. There would be a market for people to go see a flat Earth.
Yeah, until people that have more
I don't
money
wanna
than
go.
them.
You don't want to go?
I'm scared of height.
Chicken.
Yeah, I don't think it would make money. I think you'd get shut down.
But, I mean, maybe.
Dude, NASA
but-
NASA makes $80 million a day.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge amount of money laundering. And you think if somebody
I do
was
think there's a degree
to
of
set
money
up
laundering, yeah.
set up a project to disprove or discredit NASA, you think they're just going to let it happen? All those interests, all those
Putin
people.
would.
Listen, all those people making money off that $80 million a day. You think all those people are just going to let that happen?
No, but I think Putin would love to stick his thumb in NASA's eye. I think Putin
I think he
freaking
would
hates
too.
NASA. I
Yeah,
think
I agree.
Pakistan hates NASA.
Because they're being
that
genocided
global
by
cabal
Israel.
of British bankers that run the West, they don't run everything. And China's been up to the moon supposedly. Russia's been up to the moon supposedly. All these countries would love nothing more than to disprove NASA.
I don't think that's true at all.
I disagree. I think that they would
I think-
love to do it. I think there'd be more than enough financial incentive to say that there's a flat Earth if there was any way to prove that.
No.
I
Because
thought
the rulers of these countries
They're
are
not all powerful, and there's different
no,
factions.
but they all want their people to be subservient and afraid.
How does the round Earth model push that over the flat Earth model? That's the other thing I don't understand. Like if I sit there, if I tell you why people pushed evolution, I can show you that Darwin himself said this in his writings. He was like, I do not like natural theology and I want to disprove natural theology. Natural theology was Paley's watchmaker argument. If you find a watch on the beach or wherever, you know that the watch didn't get there by itself because it's too complicated. Somebody had to make it. It's the same thing with the planet and the universe. The universe didn't get there by itself. It clearly is too intricate. It's clearly designed. God had to make the universe. Darwin expressly said, I want to disprove Paley. I want to demonstrate that there is an appearance of design, but there isn't really design. He's quoted as saying that. So I can point to you and say, this is why Darwin did what he did. I can tell you that Charles Lyell and that British academia, they had financial incentives to actually push specifically Darwin's version of natural selection over Russell Wallace's. Because Russell Wallace said that natural selection applies to every other creature in the universe except the human mind. because he had spent 12 years basically island hopping, and he had seen every culture and every level of technology, and he realized in every culture throughout the world there is marriage, there is art, there is dancing. You have the same fundamental components of human behavior regardless of the technology, which means technological development is not correlated with adaptation or evolution, meaning that the mind is independent of natural selection. It had to have another source. And that was his addendum to the natural selection theory. Charles Lyell and that British establishment didn't want that, because that left the room open for natural theology, number one. Number two, I think everybody kind of understood slavery was out the window with the South. Now, this is more my opinion. I don't know if I could actually prove this if I dug around, but this is what I believe. They all felt that slavery was heading out the door. Remember, Origin of Species was published in 1859. There had been a lot of tariffs and wars going back and forth with slavery throughout the 1850s. And I think the British government, you also have to bear in mind, the British they were getting their wool and stuff from the South at that time. And in fact, Robert E. Lee was convinced that the British were going to go help them. He was actually trying to copy Washington's tactic with the French. He was trying to bleed the North dry by running around until the British could show up and reinforce them. He hoped the British would do for him what the French did for Washington, because the British were directly profiting from the slave trade in the South. Now, somehow John Seward went and stopped all that, and I don't know the details of that. But the point is, even back in the 1850s, they knew slavery was going to go out the window. So where was the British government going to get its crap? They had to find a way to justify basically reinstituting slavery, and that meant imperialism. But in order to justify imperialism... All right, hang on.
All right, I'm back.
All right. But in order to justify imperialism, they had to convince the public that people in primitive tribes in Africa were inferior to them. And if you look at the late 1800s and the early 1900s, you've got all this like basically white supremacist poetry that's talking about the white man helping these poor idiot civilian ignorant villagers evolve. We're gonna evolve these people. We're gonna spread our white race or whatever. That was all part. They wanted to push that, and they needed a theory to justify that, because they needed to find a way to replace the slave trade that they were convinced was going to die. And so that may be completely wrong. That's my guess. But the point is, I've got enough pieces of information that I can pull from to make that inference. There is nothing like that with the round earth. Why in the world would anybody conclude that the round earth is going to make people feel sad and afraid? Who concluded it? When did they conclude it? How did this conspiracy to lie to the public start? And what's your evidence to suggest that?
I think it goes pretty far back, honestly. Like Baal, Baal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, pretty much anything that. Not to shit on a bunch of people, but ball, like football, basketball, the earth is a ball. All these things kind of entertain you. They're for your entertainment, and they're like it's like a world of theater. It's a world of actors, like the Globe Theater. It's a different realm to operate within. Like Hollywood is not the same realm that we operate in. Mm-hmm. It's ball. It's like the Satan world. Mm-hmm. So I think it goes way far back, because because it makes you feel desolate, like, oh, I'm spinning through space. I could run into any kind of, I heard somebody say it last night, we could hit anything. We're just in open space. It's terrifying, going millions of miles an hour. It's ridiculous, dude. It makes you afraid, and you can't just shy away from that.
Then why did Christians believe it as far back as the 1300s? If it's that scary, why did Christians believe it?
I don't know. It's Baal. It's Satan.
How can it be Baal? Like, you're having to infer the motives of like the entire Christian church for 400 years.
Oh, why did the Christians
They
push it in the
believed in the spirit.
1300s?
Yes, that's what I said in the beginning.
Because
There
they were
are
paid off. You don't
for
think the church
400
gets paid off?
for 400 years.
Yeah. How long have the Catholics
Paid
been raping
off
little
by
boys?
who, Cody? And who the heck were the
Baal.
Greeks paid off by? So
Baal.
the demon Baal is running around with a paycheck going, here, if you say the earth is round, I'm gonna...
Ding, 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 ding.
There's no way. There's no way. Who would have paid them? The church won. They killed paganism. They were the big dog. Who was going to pay them? And why would the church care what they wanted? Huh?
Satan doesn't need money, bro.
Then how is he writing checks?
He's the master of the realm. You got to think big picture, man.
Yeah, but you have to
He's
give
the
me a
morning
reason
star.
why you think this. I'm saying it doesn't make any sense.
But it does make. Well, you're
I don't
saying
feel
it's
like
not scary.
I don't feel particularly afraid because the earth is round.
Well, I mean, you can say that, but I mean, a lot of other people say that it's scary to be flying through space.
Well, maybe I'm terrified that the sun is only 3,000 miles away and it's going to whack me in the backside of the head if I ain't paying attention. What if it decides to just drop?
I mean, it could, but I mean, God didn't design it that way.
Anything could happen. That's the problem with these ad hoc explanations. Like, I could give you terrifying scenarios. What if the dome comes crashing down?
Then
We're all
I guess that
dead.
would mean God was dead.
I mean, maybe, but that's the problem. It's like I can come up with terrifying scenarios. It doesn't matter if it's a ball. It doesn't matter if it's a disc. It doesn't matter. So what is unique about a round sphere that would make people feel afraid?
Because you're flying through space at 1,000,000 miles an hour or whatever, and spinning at 666,000
why
miles
should
an
people be
hour.
scared of that? There's literally nothing in the way.
I don't know.
Exactly. Different things are going to scare different people. If you've got
I
a
know, I
flat
feel a
Earth
lot more
model, you could come
comfortable.
up with terrifying scenarios of that. And if you got a round Earth model, you can come up with terrifying scenarios of that. There's
a lot
nothing
more
unique
comfortable
about the
as a
round Earth
created-
that's going to make life more terrifying than a flat Earth.
I feel a lot more comfortable as a created being in God's tent.
I'm still a created being in God's tent. The tent is just a circle
ball.
instead of a
Yeah,
plate.
which ball is not in the word in the Bible, but or sphere or anything like that. But it's fine.
The word, well, it doesn't matter. The word circle's in there, but
Yeah, that's a circle.
That's interchangeable with sphere, though. It's like wine. Wine could mean grape juice or an alcoholic beverage. It's interchangeable.
That's ridiculous, Gary.
They
You
didn't
can't
have
say
grape
circle
juice at
doesn't
all.
mean circle.
They had a debate like this in Owen Benjamin and Baptist Bias and the Witsit. They had this
It
exact
says he
same
drew a
conversation.
circle. It's a 2D. It's a 2D description. He says he
The
inscribed a
Hebrew
circle
word
on the
is
face. Shut up,
interchangeable.
boy.
They established that in the debate. The
Why you
word is
interrupting me?
interchangeable. It could mean either one.
No, he says he inscribed a circle on the face of the water. That's not a sphere. That doesn't make sense.
Inscribed a circle on the face of the water.
Have you ever inscribed a sphere?
What script? Let me go back to the Bible verse thing that we just did a little bit ago. Where was that located? That's the first question. What scripture are you quoting, and where was it? Dollar to donuts, it's Psalms, Jobs are one of the major and minor prophets. Dollars to donuts, it's poetic language.
You can't interpret those words differently.
Yes,
Wait, say it again.
You can't interpret God as a hen any differently. If you're going to use that methodology, you can't interpret the simile that God is a hen protecting his chicks. You can't treat it like a simile.
It's from Job.
Exactly.
I don't know. I think it's goofy to call a circle a sphere, though.
And I think it is goofy not to admit poetry is poetry. Okay. I'm going to move on and finish my thing because you still got to do your centrifugal force thing.
Okay.
So, here's the last thing that really bothers me is that everyone is lying. I understand being cynical of the government, especially given the last few years. But we're not just talking about a bunch of British academics trying to refute natural theology. We're talking about governments, businesses, civilians, all lying. The tourism industry, lying. The airplane industry, lying. The private and government space industry, lying. Every photograph that has ever been taken, not just from space, but from the upper atmosphere, is a lie. The cell phone and satellite industries are lying. Not just wrong, lying. Because sooner or later, all of these people would come across the evidence that disproves the flat earth theory or confirms it. The mathematicians of the past and present have to be lying. Entire historical figures can't even exist. Everyone has to be lying except for a handful of people unafraid of the truth. As someone who despises neo-Darwinism and is very suspicious of radiometric dating, I can relate to this, but it's astounding how quickly people will accept an idea just because it's a part of a consensus. But there comes a point where this sort of thinking is just arrogance. The problem with just accepting your own empirical data is that the mentality fails to understand that somebody else's anecdotal evidence is just as valuable as yours. And the truth is, nobody lives by empiricism alone. So here's an example. I can reasonably infer that mom and dad conceived, and that was how I was born. Was I there? No. I cannot empirically prove that mom and dad conceived me. It is hypothetically possible that I'm adopted and nobody except them knows about it. It's possible, but without any sort of corresponding evidence, it's a moot point. And I can reasonably infer that because me and my wife conceived Demi, and she looks a little bit like me, that my mom and dad conceived me. That's reasoning. Is it empirical? No. But it's the kind of reasoning everybody does in their day-to-day life. And if you're going to use that kind of reasoning in your day-to-day life, why not use math? Why not use the scientific experiments? Why say everybody is lying except for you guys? And that's something that irritates me. So, empiricism isn't enough. You have to use certain reasoning. You have to use different kinds of reasoning to come to conclusions. So, with all that said, after you're done with the centrifugal force thing, I'll move on to why the Earth is round.
So, that last point, empiricism would be like me saying, oh, well, I'm the special boy, and I think my answer is more righter.
No, empiricism is just limiting your knowledge to your sensory data. Just what you can see, just what you can feel, just what you experience.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I mean, I guess, if you want to word it that way. I was going to be more charitable than that, but yes. And my point is, you still have to make inferences on your observational data. People do that all the time, and people can't help it. So empiricism just isn't enough. And if empiricism isn't enough, why discount math? Why discount the photographs? Why discount, people who say they've been to Antarctica? Why discount all those people?
Who said I was doing that?
You said that you think the photographs are all faked. You said that the blue marble thing was like, the blue marble picture of Earth is like a bunch of cloud composites. And I'm like,
it is.
Why? Why do you think that?
Because
what makes you think that the photographs are fake other than the fact that you don't believe in the round Earth?
Because I've seen computer analytics of them tearing that thing apart and seeing all the double spots and stuff.
Well, then you need to show me a photo of that, because what I saw was a picture of the Earth and a bunch of some jackwagon did squares. I had a week, and I think I've done plenty of research. Thank you very much. I've done hours of research, and I'm a little screwy in the head because I'm sleep deprived from all the research. But the point is, and here's something else about that Witsa guy. This is like a little bit of a tangent. That dude does not know crap about photography, and it makes me mad. Because I eat, sleep, and breathe photography. It's my bread and butter. I video edit, and he was sitting there making this stupid point about how they're not being, like, you can't see enough of the stars in space or whatever. And the dude clearly doesn't freaking understand how exposure works on photographs. Like, it was insane. So he was saying, basically, and if that's the debate we end up watching, I'll show you this point. But he was saying that basically one of the reasons there wasn't space is because you can't see more of the stars in the photographs. And I was like, you idiot, that's not how light works. Like, the reason we're able to see as much as we are on planet Earth is because you've got the gases, you've got water vapor.
It wasn't space because there wasn't
enough stars. Like, you couldn't see enough stars in the photographs. So therefore, like, space wasn't real or something.
That's a stupid argument. There's no way that's within context.
I can show you the quote if we go over that debate. Like, it's Owen Benjamin, the Bible Baptist, and Witsit Gets It. Those three going back and forth. That was the one I watched.
Oh, I haven't seen it. I'd love to though.
Yeah, and that was where maybe I misunderstood it, but that's where I heard that comment, and it just made me mad because assuming I understood it correctly, it was like, you're not going to see light in space because there's nothing to reflect the light back to your eyes, and there's nothing to reflect the light back to the film. Like, you're going to be lucky if you pick up any stars at all. And plus, if you've taken a cell phone and held it up at night, I've got those creepy UFO things flying outside of Greg's house every dad blame summer. I can't catch them on my stupid cell phone.
No, you can't see it with your phone.
Yeah.
We saw a UFO last night, man. It was
Did
crazy.
you really?
Yeah.
I believe it. What it looked like?
It was I saw a hard black triangle.
Yeah?
And it had like 7 big dots inside of it.
Holy crap.
It was wild, dude. It was just like slow rolling above the house. There was like 8 of us that saw it.
Holy crap.
It was crazy. Callie spotted it.
Good night. Yeah, you'll have to show me that sometime. That's crazy.
I wish I could.
Yeah. Dude,
There's no
I wish
pictures
I
in
could
there.
catch those lights outside of Greg's house because they're so blasted regular. It's infuriating, but it's too dark.
I want to get night vision, man.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be cool.
You see all that stuff.
Yeah. But that's my point. Like, he was sitting there making this comment about there not being enough stars in the photographs of space or whatever. And it's like...
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird.
You can take pictures of stars from Earth if you've got enough equipment or whatever, but, I mean, you have to have light to expose the film, or even digitally, from what I understand. But anyway, Go on to your centrifugal force point.
So I was just gonna say, and I think I've talked about this before. Yeah. So the it doesn't make any sense to me that okay. So what you're saying, the gravity comes from? Let me start here. You're saying gravity comes from the core of the Earth, right?
I don't know if it comes from the core of the Earth. I don't know. This is kind of getting into nuanced technical stuff. But basically, material matter is just coming together at central points because of gravity. Like, during the Big Bang, everything's compressed, hot spinning dot blown around, Big Bang happens, you get these little islands of matter, and they eventually condense into ball-like objects. And so they're basically all just kind of compacting together in the void.
So what's the force, the driving force behind that?
Well, that's what we call gravity. I mean, basically, the mass of the objects are all collecting together and crunching together, and that force toward that pull towards a central point is what I guess what we call gravity. So,
well, I find that theory to be quite ridiculous. I like what the Bible says about it. But that's just me. I don't know. Some
we
people
need to
don't
go
like
back
it.
to that. We spent so long on that.
Oh man. But no, just like if you take, it's just a description I wanted to go over. If you take a tennis ball and dunk it in water, like it's got all that hair on the outside of it, right? So it kind of holds some fluid. If you take this ball and you throw it, where does the water go?
If you throw the ball.
Yeah, and it starts spinning.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So because the water gets kicked off the ball.
Right, that's
then...
centrifugal force. What you're what they describe as, that What they describe is opposite of that. I don't understand.
No, I understand your question, and that's a good question. I don't exactly know. This is what I was taught in earth science, and I can demonstrate that with the bucket analogy. You throw a bucket over your head.
But that's not the same thing. That's what I was saying.
Yes, I disagree, and here's why. Again, the water is acting like a closed system, and so you're able to move independently in the water while the water itself is being pushed up against the base of the bucket. And so in the globe model, the water
Where's
is
the
the
base of the bucket?
atmosphere. The atmosphere.
Where's the base of the bucket?
Well, let's just say it would be the central point, gravity. Everything's being pulled towards.
But that's the opposite thing. That's the outside. That's the container. That's not the center.
No, it's not. That's not the container.
The bucket?
Well, yeah, the bucket's the container, but the
bucket
gravity.
is
You asked
necessary for the
what the
experiment.
bottom of the bucket was. I'm saying gravity's the bottom of the bucket.
That's opposite. That doesn't make sense.
No, I'm not saying centrifugal force creates gravity. I'm saying centrifugal force in conjunction with gravity is what's keeping us on the planet. Like,
So
centrifugal
gravity
force is why we're not necessarily feeling it, and then gravity is why we're on the planet to start with.
So gravity is 10 to the power of centrifugal force. Like it overtakes it.
I don't know if I would go that far. That's getting really technical, and I'd be showing my ignorance if I say.
Well, I
yay
mean
or
that's
nay
what
on
you're
that.
arguing.
I'm saying that the reason you don't feel the Earth spinning is because of
gravity is
centrifugal
stronger
force.
than the centrifugal force.
Centrifugal force kind of locks you in place, and you're not going to feel. And it's not just centrifugal. It's centrifugal force, but it's centrifugal force acting on the atmosphere and keeping everything kind of. That's not the right way to put it. Centrifugal force is kind of like keeping the atmosphere kind of connected to the planet, maybe, and then
No,
gravity
the
is pulling
centrifugal
everything
force would
downward.
be the opposing force. Centrifugal force would be trying to kick everything off
Yeah,
the
but
planet.
the problem with your analogy though is we're talking about the void of space. Like the fact that it's a void of space like changes the dynamics of it. Like the reason the water's getting thrown off the ball is you've got air pushing against the water. That's creating wind resistance. That's throwing stuff off. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So if you had a tennis ball covered in water in a vacuum chamber and spun it remotely, it would not fling off?
Possibly. That would be a really cool experiment to try.
It would. I think it would fling off still.
You could be right. I don't know. But my understanding of it is that the centrifugal force is kind of pressing the gases onto the planet. And the gravity has something to do with that. It's like keeping us stuck there further still. Maybe I'm completely screwing that up.
Yes, the centrifugal force would be fighting against the gravitational force.
I don't know.
And so the gravitational force would have to be way stronger than centrifugal. And they admit that gravity is way less of a force when it comes to reality. It's a way weaker force than electromagnetics.
Gravity is weaker than electromagnetics?
Yeah. By a lot.
You could be right. I'm not sure if that's relevant, but you mean you could be right about that.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like the centrifugal force, the chances that the gravitational force is stronger than the centrifugal force is kind of low because they admit how weak gravity is. So,
well, I mean,
we're just having thought experiments here. But.
Yeah, I don't know how strong or weak the gravitational force is in relation to centrifugal force. When I was a kid, what they taught in earth science was the bucket analogy.
Yeah.
And that worked. You know, things stayed compressed to the base of the bucket. And from my understanding, gravity is kind of the base of the bucket. Or maybe the earth itself was the base of the bucket. Bottom line is the water stays in place and it doesn't move. And if you're small enough in that closed system, you're not going to feel the forces acting around that system. So if the water, in this case the atmosphere, is staying pressed against the planet because of centrifugal force, you wouldn't feel the spin because in effect the atmosphere is protecting you because the force is traveling around the atmosphere.
Yeah, I find that really silly.
I don't think
know.
it's as silly as the flat Earth model, man.
Yeah, that's cool. I think all the models are silly because you shouldn't. I mean, unless you get really high, then you don't know where you are.
Okay. Okay.
I ain't never been that high.
You ain't ever been that high.
No.
Define
Like up by the sun,
model
man.
plausible?
Yeah, like to see where you're at. I don't know where I'm at. I never even been on an airplane. Why would I predict a model?
I think you need models in this case because they're a hypothesis. You got to be able to explain all the phenomena.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Yeah, but see, to say that you don't know in the way that you're describing it, that's the empiricism I was complaining about in the closing statement. You're limiting yourself to your own sensory data, but you don't do that in other areas of your life. So why would you do that with this theory? Why not make reasonable assumptions? You assume that your mom and dad conceived you, but you weren't there. You have no sensory data to prove it.
My birth certificate.
Well, that's an inference. That's not empirical. Somebody just wrote that, man.
I don't like the way you're being right now.
I'm sorry. I will give you the centrifugal force thing. I don't think I've done enough research on that, and I will get back to you on that to see if I can understand that better. But
you were saying there's no kinks in the chain, basically. I think earlier about the globe Earth. Like there's never been a thing where they were like, look, it's a globe.
Kinks in the chain.
Yeah,
I have no
because
idea
you said
what you're referring
with
to.
Darwin's theory. So like the Nebraska caveman.
No, there's a clear narrative. I know who chose
there's-
the Darwinian theory. I know why they chose it. I know when they chose it. I can give you. I might be wrong, and people can bicker about exactly what happened, but I've got data points to build a story. Okay. That's my point. With the round Earth model or people choosing to all agree on this collective lie, there's no data points. There's no reason to think that actually happened.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
There's the moon landing. There's all this like different shit that people argue about.
That you have to assume was fake too. It's just like ad hoc after ad hoc after ad hoc. It's an ad hoc explanation to serve your purpose. One on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. You need... Who faked the moon landing exactly? Whose idea was it to fake the moon landing? And I think I know why. It was to basically scare the Russians and to, encourage the public. But whose idea was it? And it's the same thing with the round Earth model. Like, whose idea was it to use the round Earth model to demoralize the public? When did they decide it?
I don't think it's to demoralize the public. It's to put them in a hypersensory state so they're easier to manipulate.
Okay, that's fine, but somebody had to make the decision, or a group of somebodies had to make the decision. Who was it, or who were they? When did they do it? What made them...
Mammon.
Who?
Ball.
Okay, yes, on the macro spiritual level, the devil is behind anything. But who was the mouthpiece of the devil in this case?
In this case, probably Werner von Braun.
Okay, see, that's the kind of answer I'm looking for. Why do you think it's Werner von Braun?
Because he was the head of NASA at the time.
And that's the only reason you got. He was the head of NASA, so he had to be the head of the round Earth thing.
He was put in charge of it. He was literally put in charge of it.
Put in charge of the round Earth conspiracy?
No, the Apollo missions.
Okay, well, I'm talking about the round Earth model. The moon landing thing, I mean, the Earth could be round and the moon landing still be faked. Like, those are not connected pieces of data.
No, but there are points in which the establishment tried to convince the public of something.
Well, evolution's a point that the establishments tried to convince the public of stuff.
Right. Yeah,
Like
it's the
there's
same
lots
thing.
of
It's
examples of that
bullshit.
happening, but I'm not refuting that the governments do that. What I'm saying is, in the same way that I can look at historical pieces of evidence and kind of get an approximate idea of what happened, you need to be able to do something similar with the round earth model. If it was Werner von Braun that said we need to tell people that the earth is round so that we can demoralize the public, make them feel afraid, isolated, and alone, you need some kind of historical piece of data to prove that. You need something that gives me some kind of idea what happened and why it happened and when it happened. Like, I need a story. It might not be right in all the particulars, but I need some kind of story.
Oh. I'm a bad storyteller, bro.
Well, that's because there is no story. They've just been throwing this out in the ether because it's like counterculture.
Huh? Throwing what out in the ether?
The flat earth model. They've been
Oh
suggesting
my
the
God.
flat earth
Man,
model
if
because
there
it's
wasn't a flat earth, there
counterculture.
wouldn't even be a thing called an ether.
It's insane. It's an analogy. There are people that are just advocating for the flat earth because it's counterculture, not because it's actually real.
There is a lot of that. There is a lot of that.
Yeah. And I would also argue that's probably why there's so many models of it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you know, they can't get into agreement because a lot of these guys haven't actually done the research. It's just, you know, it's not the, it's like it's the fight the system mentality, which I am all for. I like the fight the system mentality. The system can burn, but you gotta have data points. You can't just do something for fighting this. You can't just fight the system for its own sake. Like when I got critical of evolution, it wasn't because I was assuming my professors were lying to me. When they started to explain to me radiometric dating methods, specifically when I was in high school, they were doing carbon-13, but they don't do that anymore because it got called out too quickly, so they changed it to potassium, argon, and other crap. But when I was in middle school, they were pushing the carbon-13 thing. Carbon-13, carbon-14, one of the two. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense because how do you know how much carbon-13, carbon-14 is in a fossil to begin with? How can you measure the half-life if you don't know how much of the element you're measuring is in there in the fossil to start with? How can you do that? Well, that question made me raise an eyebrow. And then you start doing the research. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay to be cynical of something if there's something specific bothering you and it's prompting you to ask questions. But if you're just challenging the professor because they're the professor and you want to fight the man because it's fighting the man, well, that's different. That's a whole different attitude that I don't really like. Like, you need to have a specific question. Like, there needs to be a reason why you're challenging the consensus. Like, why did I instantly decide that the COVID vaccines were crap and told Jess we're not getting that thing?
Because all vaccines are crap?
No, it was because it happened right as everything was going really, really well in the Democratic, like when the Democratic primary was going on the fall before, the Democrats were making complete butts of themselves and they just nuked themselves. And Trump was killing it in the election cycle. And he just kept killing it. And so I was sitting there thinking, months before COVID ever happened, they've got to do something. They've got to, like, basically toss the apple cart, you know, to win this election. Because if he gets in for 8 years, they're done. You know, they got to do something. And they've got crap candidates that are all like 80 years old. And then like 2 months later, COVID happened. Me and Greg had this conversation. We're like, this is going too well. They're going to do something crazy to throw the apple cart because that's the only way they're going to win. Sure enough, oh my gosh, there's this pandemic. Oh no. It was exactly what we predicted. That's why I didn't do the vaccines. That's why I was cynical of COVID from the start, because they were clearly getting their teeth kicked in months before they, COVID ever. Yeah, months before anything actually kicked off.
So you think just the Democrats did the COVID thing?
No, I think the Pentagon did it.
Oh, why?
Because Trump's the only president that has had no new wars in the last 40 years. Like, he's tapping into the military-industrial complex's money. They can't make money if they can't kill people.
Yeah.
And so he was dipping into their pocketbook, and that required them to do something. And Obama and Fauci and those guys had been working on those viruses since about 2014, 2015. And they got caught, and they moved all their research to China. So they grabbed this crap that they'd been working on anyway and just chucked it onto the world, and then screamed there was a pandemic, and basically moved some stupid end of the world scenario they had planned years ago. They just moved it forward 4 or 5 years. You know, that's getting into Alex Jones' stuff, and that's a whole other conversation. But the point is, me and Greg knew they were going to do something months before COVID ever happened, and that observation made me cynical. I wasn't cynical of COVID just because it was the government saying there's COVID. There were other factors influencing my decisions. And so my problem with the flat earth model is that it just seems to be challenging the consensus just because it's the consensus. I'm not seeing anything specific about the round earth model that makes them go, well, that doesn't make sense. Because
there's nothing in the round earth model that doesn't make you go, huh. Nothing.
Let me think, because I want to be honest. So you have to give me a minute. The only thing that would make me question the round earth, the only thing that I know of that doesn't make sense to me, is the fact that the moon is so large on the horizon and gets smaller when it goes up. That could be explained by some other phenomena, but I've always found that a little weird. But beyond that, I can't, like, the centrifugal force thing makes sense to me. I'll get into some reasons why I think the earth is flat here in a minute. But yeah, I think it explains all the data points.
Huh. Okay.
So with that said, that seems like a pretty good transition for why I think the earth is round.
Okay.
So Aristophanes calculated the circumference of the earth, and the flat earth community claims that the same math can be done if you change the sun's size and distance. But I think this fails to explain the seasons. So for example, the earth isn't moving, it's stationary. And of all the things they've argued about, everybody I've seen on the flat earth model does seem to agree that the earth has to be stationary. That does seem to be like a consistent claim. So the earth can't move. Now, that means in order to get winter, the sun has to move, right? So the sun has to move away from some location on the earth in order for there to be a winter, because the earth can't move. So the earth is stuck. So, if that is true, then the sun should be smaller in the winter by some degree. But that's not what we see. The sun is actually 3.4% larger during the winter. And according to the astronomers, the sun is the reason this is the case is because the earth is actually 3 million miles closer to the sun during the winter. The reason that it's colder is because of the tilt. So even though the sun is bigger in the sky during the winter, the temperatures are colder. And I do not see how that is possible in a flat earth model. So as far as I know, the round earth model with a tilt is the only feasible explanation for that phenomena.
Why does the tilt make it colder?
Because you're no longer getting direct sunlight. You're getting the sunlight at an angle.
And that makes the rays less hot?
Yeah, you're not getting hit directly.
That's stupid as fuck.
Why is that stupid? It's just like when you're sitting there in the...
Because you're 300 million miles closer to the sun. Why would the tilt matter?
Well, imagine shining a light directly on a flat surface versus shining something at an angle. Like if you've got a light directly overhead and you've got a flat surface, it's going to be hot. But if you do this, then this portion is going to be colder than this portion. The light isn't going to hit the entire thing directly.
Yeah, but it's 300 million miles closer. Is that what you said?
Yes. Not 300, 3 million. 3
3
million
million
closer.
miles closer. Dude, the tilt isn't going to make a shit worth of difference if it's 3 million miles closer.
It is if the thing's like 45. Oh, how long is
You
it?
could
It's
say
million.
that, but
It's
it's
like
dumb.
hundreds of millions of miles away.
It's dumb.
I don't think so. I think that's the only thing that could possibly make sense. 3 point. How then? Explain to me in the flat Earth model why in the dad blame world the sun is bigger in the sky during the winter and smaller in the summer.
I don't know that.
That is the exact opposite of what the flat Earth would predict.
Okay, so the sun is bigger in the winter.
Yes. And smaller in the summer. By a flat
know.
Earth model, there's no freaking way that could happen.
I think of the sun as an aperture. So I guess, I don't know. It's like how much, like a camera lens. I guess in theory it could change size.
Well, it wouldn't. I mean, even
don't
if
know.
you're right, it wouldn't change the problem. Because the Earth can't move. So if the Earth can't move, that means the sun has to change. Which means in order to get things colder, the sun has to be further away. But if the sun is closer and things are colder anyway, how can you get that on a flat Earth model?
I don't know. What do I look like, God?
Exactly. There's no explanation. There's none. There's none.
I mean, I'm sure there is. But
Well, I have yet to find it. So
I guarantee you a flat one would make a whole lot more sense than a round one.
you'll have to dig around and see. All right. So reason number 2. It's not just that there are seasons. Now we had a big long conversation about heat disbursement earlier. And that's one aspect of the problem. But here's what gets me. Why do you have seasonal reversals?
Huh?
Seasonal reversals. When it's summer in the northern hemisphere, it's winter in the southern hemisphere, and vice versa. How does that make sense on the flat Earth model? Because from what I understand from every model I've seen, and there are multiple, the sun still has to make 24-hour orbits around the entire plane. So if it still has to make enough like orbits around the 24-hour plane, how do you get winter over here, summer over here, and then vice versa? How do you create seasonal reversals on the different sides of the planet when the sun has to make 24-hour revolutions all the time? The tilt's the only thing that can explain the seasonal reversals.
If it went up in a vortex, would that make sense?
Like if it went upward?
Yeah.
I don't see how. Here's the problem, and I haven't mentioned this before with the vortex thing. If you've got it 3,000 miles away from the Earth, it's hypothetically possible to get the day-night cycles. But even if the sun is smaller and you move the sun further up, you're going to screw with the day-night cycles by a lot. So the higher up you go, like say 250,000, if you went 250,000 miles above the Earth, by the measurements that they use from Aristophanes' math, the entire flat Earth plane would be in daylight all the time. So there's a cap on how high it can go. I don't know if that would... So I don't know, I mean, I'm not sure if that's relevant to what you said, but... You're very limited in how far the sun can go with the flat Earth model, I guess is my point. So how would you get seasonal reversals? Like, there needs to be a way that that's demonstrated, because on the globe model, tilt, summer, winter, summer, winter. You know, it's tilting, and so that's why you get opposing seasons on different hemispheres.
I've never thought about it, I guess.
Yeah. So how do you get opposing seasons on a flat Earth?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about it for a week.
Yeah. So that's my second reason. Now, this is interesting. Reason number 3, there's been a lot of like footage on the internet of showing like cameras just zooming and zooming and zooming and zooming.
Uh-huh.
And they're cool. But if you leave the camera on, what you see is the ship descending into the water. Now that shouldn't
Because
be
it
possible.
sunk?
Huh?
Because it sunk?
No, because it's disappearing from view. When the object finally does disappear, if you zoom that camera, it doesn't matter how far out you go. If that object is moving and you keep that camera footage on that moving object, as it moves away from you, it dips below the horizon. Doesn't matter how far it is. Now, in a flat Earth model, that shouldn't be possible. What should happen is either it shrinks indefinitely until it gets too small to see, or it fades because of like water vapor and atmospheric debris or whatever. So it should either shrink or fade from view, like a person moving in the fog. But that's not what happens. It dips below the horizon, which suggests there's a circumference. So
Or it suggests there's waves.
no, because if there were waves,
you're
then
condensing.
there would be like oh, we lost Trevor. Uh-oh.
Oh.
That's not good. Now, how in the world am I going to fix this? Where?
Because whenever you go to zoom in on a boat, all that water line in front of you, all that horizon line, it's all being condensed into a relatively small frame.
That's the best I
Right.
can do. I'm sorry, say that again. I was trying to create a scenario where people could at least see our face. So I'm sorry, repeat that.
Oh, it's all messed up, huh?
Yeah, with Trevor gone, my windows are all screwed up, but I've got it where people can tolerate it until he comes back.
Yeah.
So
So whenever you zoom in on that boat, you're condensing a whole bunch of horizon into that frame, into that picture, right?
when you're zooming in
Like
on
all the water that's leading up to the picture gets condensed into.
I would assume it's getting condensed. Yeah, okay. I think I'm
Okay.
following you.
So all that water in front of you, that miles and miles of water, like you've got waves in that, you've got whatever else, plus the humidity.
If that were the case, there'd be an ebb and flow to it. So you would see
There is.
you would see it and come in and out of view, and then that would just be the case until it faded entirely.
there
Instead, it
always is.
continues to sink until it's all the way gone, and then you don't see it anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't fade. It
Huh?
doesn't fade.
No, I
The
didn't
object
say it
doesn't
would
fade,
fade.
and the object doesn't shrink. It descends.
It does undulate. Like those videos do that.
Well, yes, it's going to undulate, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the wave shifting of it or the vibration of the image. I'm talking about the motion of the entire vessel. The motion of the entire vessel goes downward until it's gone entirely. If you've got waves, like if you've got an object and you've got waves, then you're going to see it for a second and then not see it, and then see it for a second and then not see it. And
Which you
that
always do in those
process is
videos.
going to continue until it fades from view entirely. And so what we see, though, is that it goes downward. And so this doesn't really matter because, if it's flat, it's still going to fade from view. If it's descending, you're still going to see it descend. Like the waves aren't going to matter.
Huh. Well, I guess we've seen different videos. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we've seen different videos, but who can say? But that's another issue. Now, let's see. What's point number 4? Yeah, I think this is me reiterating the Southern Hemisphere stars, but I'm basically rephrasing this in the affirmative. I don't think there's another explanation for the stars spinning in opposite directions except a sphere. So if they're turning clockwise in the northern hemisphere and they're turning counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere, that has to be because one person's standing right side up, the other person's standing upside down. The motion of the stars, I don't see how Whitsitt's perspective idea really fixes the problem.
I don't think they do turn counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere.
Well, that's what people say, and the flat earthers
Is that
deny
another one of
it.
those in
Well,
Australia?
Witsit
The
didn't
toilet goes
deny it,
backwards.
huh?
Does the toilet go backwards in Australia?
I didn't use that argument because I thought the flat earthers had a rebuttal for that.
Well, I mean, is that one of those same kind of things?
Yeah, it's the same kind of deal.
Okay.
But I from what I understand, the flat earthers are able to explain the water phenomena. So I didn't.
Yeah,
use
it's
the
not
point.
real. It doesn't actually happen.
See, now you're just denying like people's experience, though. Like, why should
Yeah,
I
but
trust? Why should I trust you over them, or vice versa?
I'll
Like,
look it up right now. Two toilets. Flush backwards. Australia.
All right, while you're working on that, I'm gonna
Toilets do not flush backwards in Australia.
Okay, well,
It's just bullshit. So the hemisphere thing might be bullshit too. I don't know.
Witsit didn't deny it when he was called out on it. He just tried to explain it with the perspective thing. That
Well, I don't know.
didn't
I'm not
make any
Witsit.
sense to me. So there's that. So I don't need to stay on that long because we've already like debated that for like 45 minutes. So, all right, I'm gonna switch scenes here and then pull up a picture because I figured I would do a crappy job describing this.
Okay.
So here are a bunch of tall objects,
Yeah.
windmills, and if you'll notice, bottom's cut off by the horizon. This suggests a curvature. Now, I was watching a math guy on this point, and it turns out, even though I don't know the freaking numbers, I was actually right on this. So the reason that you can see stuff further out on the water, like when you're standing at a beach, is because the height of the object actually does dramatically change the math. So, if you're standing here and the thing's taller than you, then you're going to be able to see it further and further away. So, I think that was Trevor, actually.
Yeah, it was.
So, yeah, the height of the object,
See, to me,
yeah, does alter the
When you-
math, and you should be able to see it further out. So, he's trying to get back on. He says his computer froze.
yeah. So when you zoom in on that windmill, to me, there is miles and miles of water right there at the base of that windmill, all being condensed into a little spot.
Okay.
So, which says the base of the windmill is also being condensed.
I mean,
Like the more
that-
you zoom in, the more you're going to see. I mean, it's that simple. It's just a condensed photo.
So you're saying that is an optical illusion of the camera.
Yeah.
So what if somebody actually went out and said that? I mean, because this is just an example, but I mean, people go out and claim that they're seeing the phenomena of tall stuff looking like it's growing out of the water and the bottom being cut off.
Because the photo's being
No,
your
they're
vision does
seeing
the
it with
same
their
thing
eyeballs.
as the camera. They made the camera based off the eye, bro.
So you think it's an optical illusion?
Yeah.
So you have
I mean,
to
it's-
assume that light
it's
is
just light
literally
exposure.
bending. Say that again?
It's what? I said it's just light exposure. What's bending?
So light has to be literally bending to create this illusion, rather than just assuming the flat Earth
No.
or the round Earth.
Bending.
Like, well, you're talking about this being an optical illusion. Well, that means that the light has to be bending around to create it, doesn't it?
Not bending, condensing.
The light has to be condensing.
It's because you're putting miles and miles of image. Like, if you take a picture of just a straight black line
Uh-huh.
and it goes for miles and miles, you're not going to have any idea how long that line is.
Well, yeah, we're not making a claim about exactly how long this line is, but the bottom
Right,
of the
but what I'm
windmill
saying
is
is
cut
all
off.
that image is being condensed into that like you're not seeing the whole picture. It's like
Well,
it's like an accordion.
You might be right about like the optical effect, but I'm not seeing how that changes the problem. Because the bottom line is the base of these windmills is not seen. They're obscured.
Because it's condensed. You just can't render it with your eye.
How does that work? So you can't see
more
the
you-
base
yeah.
at all simply because it's condensed.
The more you zoom in, the more of the base that you're going to see, just like with a boat.
But there is no base there.
Well, it's because it's already zoomed all the way in. It's a shitty picture.
I'm going to
I'm telling you,
with
dude. I've taken a telescope to the ocean, and when you watch a boat disappear on the horizon, and then you take that telescope and you bring it back into view, and it's like, oh, it's right there. It hasn't sunk at all.
Yeah, if you zoom it in more, but my point was if you hold it, it's going to continue to look like it's descending.
Because it's the same effect repeating itself.
Exactly. That effect is the curvature of the Earth.
No, that effect is condensation of the image that you're looking at.
If it was condensation of the image, it would fade from view. It doesn't make any sense for things to be like condensing and warping to
They're not
create certain
warping.
illusions. Like
just-
if stuff
you're
gets
just
further
seeing-
and further away, then you've got more crap in the way. Oh, and we're back.
There
Hang
it
on
is.
a minute. I gotta fix our windows again. All right. Hang on a minute. Trevor, welcome back. Can you hear us, sir?
Yeah, what's up?
Oh, we're just arguing about the nature of illusions and whether you can get kind of the base of a windmill to be blocked by condensing the light from a distance in an image.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, Trevor, when you look at, let's say that center windmill that Gary's been zooming in
You
on.
want me to zoom in on it again? Let me pull
Yep.
this up for OBS, and then
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
going
buddy.
to zoom on this again.
Yeah, none of those are zoomed in on. Oh, I
Okay.
got you.
Yeah.
So, when you bring that windmill back into view,
Yeah.
if you're looking at the base, the further in you zoom in, the more of that base of the windmill that you're going to see because the image is being condensed. So the horizon line there is being all condensed into one big blocky mess. And you can't see the base of the windmill.
Right. I just assumed that was like the beach or something that somebody's out on a boat and that's just a beach.
Huh?
The picture is
windmills?
being taken from a boat, right?
No, it's probably on the beach.
Oh. Well, where are the windmills?
We don't
I
exactly
don't know. Are they in the ocean?
They're at the ocean. We don't know the exact distances. My point was you can't see the base of them. And if you can't see the base of the windmill, that's probably because, or the base of a tall object in general. Say, change out a windmill for a mast or a tower. It doesn't really matter. If you can't see the base of the object, the reason you can't see the base of the object is because of the curvature of the Earth. The windmills thing's just an example. Doesn't
So,
really
well, I mean-
matter what the object is.
Do pictures do what I'm saying? Do they condense?
Not that I know of, dude, to be honest. Like, yeah, I've never ran into that with my work, video editing. I mean, I've never encountered anything like that. So I really can't.
And honestly, it
you
wouldn't
might
be hard.
right, and it might be some ocular effect I'm not aware of, but I got to tell you, I've never, in all my years of working on Photoshop and doing video editing, I've never ran into what you're talking about.
Okay.
So, I mean, generally what happens if you from a distance is things just get blurrier and blurrier because you got more crap in the way. So you're going to get the waviness like you're talking about. You're not going to get anything condensing, but you are going to get the ripple effect and like a distortion. because it's
It's the same-
basically
it's the
it's
same thing that
basically
you're
light.
talking
It's
about.
basically light reflecting off a bunch of crap, but you're not going to get like the entire image to condense to the point that you're going to obscure something, and that's like making it impossible. Like I just don't know what you're. I've never
like
seen
the-
that.
You'd say the further away something is, the blurrier it gets.
Right.
That's because the atmosphere, like the more atmosphere you're looking through, the more stuff you're looking through.
Correct.
So the atmosphere is more dense.
I don't know if it's more dense. It's just you're seeing
You're,
more
'cause you're
water
looking
vapor.
more through stuff, right?
Yeah, you're just looking for more stuff.
So the closer to the ground you get, the more water's in the air.
Yeah, there could be more water in the air, not enough to block out a solid object entirely. Like that can't just be due to water vapor. It's just going to get blurrier and blurrier. But the fact that the image is being cut off at a sharp angle suggests something's blocking it entirely, something's solid. I don't see how that's going to be. I don't see how an optical illusion could create that. I could be wrong. I just don't see it.
Okay.
So,
Well, that's all I got to say on that, man.
all right. Well, we got one more point. Last one.
Okay. Let's do it.
Okay. So, when it comes to the moon, everybody sees the same side of it. However, it varies in distance a little bit, and it has very distinct features, very distinct topography, very distinct shadows.
Yeah.
And those shadows change based on where you're standing on the Earth. So, if you are in the northern hemisphere, the moon's shadows will make an N. If you are on the southern hemisphere, the shadows will make a U. Because on the southern hemisphere, you're standing upside down. And the round Earth model is the only model I know that explains this. So let me show you a picture to demonstrate my point.
Good, because I have never ever seen a moon shadow.
I'll show you what I mean.
Oh, those. Okay.
Yeah. So you got an N, you got a U. Northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. I have no idea how in the world a flat Earth model could create this effect. The round Earth model is the only thing I know of that could do that.
I mean, I think it just rolls as it goes in its circle or whatever. I think it just rolls slowly. So like China sees it upside down from what we do.
Nobody's ever said that. It could be, but from what I understand, everybody sees the same moon face their entire life from where they're at, and it only changes based on your location in the globe.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Yeah, I just think it rolls around like I look at all this stuff like a big watch, man. Like the sky clock.
well, I don't think that's wrong. I just think that this is a more likely explanation. It's certainly simpler than assuming that. Yeah, it's just simpler to assume that you're standing upside down. I mean, look, it's a direct. In the northern hemisphere, it makes an N. In the southern hemisphere, it makes a U because you're standing upside down. That's what you would expect on a round Earth model.
Did you hear
What would
yourself
you
say that?
What? All right,
It
what
makes
I
more
say that was
sense that you're
stupid.
standing upside down.
Yes,
that
you're
makes more sense to
Yeah,
me.
from the view of space, crazy as it sounds, you're standing upside down.
It does sound crazy. That's what I'm saying.
Then explain this. You said that the moon is like shifting.
It's like a disc.
But that
So
is a
it's-
direct correlation between the top of the planet and the bottom of the planet.
Or it's all flat and that thing's just turning around us and it spins as it moves around.
Nobody has ever demonstrated that. And
What do you mean?
Nobody has ever said that the moon is rotating. I don't know of a
I
flat
just did.
earther I don't know of a flat earther or a round earther or anybody that says that the moon rotates in any way, shape, or form. I don't think
I just
anybody
did.
actually says that on either side. And I'm saying I don't think let me just do this from zero. Let's say that this is actually a thing. So if it were rotating, there would be no correlation between where you're at on the planet and what shadows the moon is actually doing. Furthermore, why would it be spinning like this in an orbit? Like when planetary bodies are orbiting around each other in the traditional model, they're turning because essentially the gravity, like they're fighting each other. And so they're spinning, and they're also spinning around each other because one force is trying to gain the edge over the other. If you have the moon spinning over the Earth by whatever means, and then you not only have it spinning over around the Earth, but you have it spinning in a way that is independent of the body itself, that means there's another force acting on it, aside from the magnetism in the flat Earth model. Again, it would be like a third acting force. So is the sun causing it to spin? Like, is this thing spinning clockwise towards the sun? Because you said the electromagnetic thing would be acting on it as a third force. So is this thing spinning clockwise? Is it spinning counterclockwise? Can you coordinate this spin with the movement of the sun? Like, there would be other questions that nobody's ever even addressed.
I'm sure they have. I mean, I haven't. Yeah, I do think it like rolls. I mean, you could think of it like a gear, so it doesn't get out of time, but it rolls like a gear following the sun.
You're the first person I've heard that said that. Maybe you're right, but I'm just saying that would imply a third force at work besides magnetism that nobody's identified. You've said the magnetism of the sun. Well, then there should be some correlation between which direction the moon is spinning and the sun itself.
Dude, but I don't have all the answers.
Well, I know, but I'm telling you, like, this is Occam's razor. Like, the simplest explanation is most likely the right one. It is simpler to assume. Like, you've got, by simpler, you mean, like, I mean less variables. You have to make less assumptions. This is a rule in philosophy. So, in Occam's razor, in this scenario, the simplest explanation is to assume that you are on a sphere and that one person is standing up and the other person is standing down. Why? Because you have to make one assumption. In your scenario, the Earth has to be stationary. The moon has to be rotating not just around the Earth, but rotating independently of the Earth, implying a third force. You've got one explanation as opposed to three explanations, like three variables, three things that you have to prove. You're adding additional things that you have to prove that's what I think the term ad hoc explanation is. You are adding ad hoc explanations on top of, what we're observing to account for a variable you don't understand. So, but to do that, you have to make more assumptions. I'm assuming one thing, a spherical Earth. That's how you get this one observation. In the north, it makes an N, and in the south, it makes a U. You are saying that the Earth is still, the moon is moving in an orbit, and it's also doing this. Which means there's three different forces at work. That's three assumptions compared to one just to get this single anomaly. Let's say that the Earth is rotating. Let's just knock it down to two. The bottom line is you're still making more assumptions because you have to pile on explanation after explanation to account for what you're seeing. Hypothetically, you could be right. But in the rules of philosophy, in general practice, you want to go with the simpler explanation.
That the Earth is a spinning, wobbling space ball?
No, the theory with the least assumptions is the correct one.
The theory with the least assumptions.
Or the least variables.
Your one assumption is that gravity's real and the whole Earth is a spinning, wobbling, tilting space pair.
My one assumption is in order to create this specific effect, this one picture, the N and the U, somebody has to be standing on top of the Earth and somebody has to be standing below it, which craps on your flat Earth model.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does, unless the flat Earth is now a coin.
What?
The only way it would
coin?
work on a flat Earth model, this is a model I've never seen, but then this would be an ad hoc explanation, is if the flat Earth is basically like a quarter, and you've got topography on the top and topography on the bottom, and there's people on, each
Oh, God,
plane.
that's dumb.
Huh?
I said, oh, God, that's dumb.
Yeah, that would be dumb. So the spherical model is more likely.
I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying now that you've said that.
Yeah, but the problem with if you're really going to sit there and complain about people being upside down in space, you're assuming that the void has gravity. Do you understand?
No, why'd you say it had two sides of the coin? That's retarded.
How do you get somebody standing right side up in one picture and the other?
Because the moon turns by itself, man.
We just addressed that to make that claim, you have to have two forces instead of one at work. You're making more assumptions to create that scenario. I'm saying you could hypothetically be correct, but that doesn't follow the rule of Occam's razor. And again, the problem is there's no model established for how this would work on any of the flat Earth models.
Well, the Bible says, "I placed the stars and the moon and the sun in the sky, or in the firmament, actually, for signs and seasons," which means they keep time. I don't know what mechanism that is, but that's what they do.
How is that not true under my model?
Because it says nothing about your model.
It doesn't say anything about the flat Earth model. You
It
guys
says
have
all
quoted a
kinds
bunch
of
of
stuff, but
poetry
it's
and
all
called it
poetic, and
scientific
you don't
passages.
take any of it seriously.
I don't take poetic passages where God is literally compared to a chicken to be literal.
You're the only one that brought that verse up, guys.
It's an actual verse. And it's called a simile. These are
Okay, well,
literary
hey,
tools.
it says-
And you're trying to take a genre of literature that uses specific literary tools.
I'm just saying it says flat a whole bunch, and it doesn't even have the word
It
sphere
does
or
not
ball
say
or
flat.
nothing
It
anywhere
says
in
foundations. It says the earth
Firm,
shall not
unmoving.
move. It says
yeah,
ends of the earth. It says corners. It says poetic comparisons
Things that a ball can't have,
because they're similes. Anyway,
So I don't understand why you said the coin upside down thing.
because in this scenario, the moon, I don't think, here's what I was getting at. I don't think your idea works because you have too many assumptions. The idea that the moon is turning is an ad hoc assumption to account for an anomaly. So I do not think it works. So I am trying to come up with another scenario that would at least have one assumption to make it comparable with mine. So I said the only way that you could get a scenario with the flat Earth model that has given the criterion I've set up with these pictures that's comparable to mine is that the flat Earth is a coin. Because you've got to get somebody standing upside down and somebody standing right side up.
So
Otherwise,
you
you
made this
have to
argument
assume that
so
the moon
I
itself
didn't
is
have-
moving, and that assumes that there's another force at play. Because now you've got the moon orbiting the Earth, and now you've got the moon orbiting in a way that is completely contrary to... Well, that's the one thing about the moon that nobody argues, is that we see the same face of it throughout the world. It's just the face of it changes from perspective. So now you're saying that the moon is orbiting, but why would it orbit like this? This doesn't conform to any model of gravity or magnetism that we have.
Because it's just rolling. It's that simple that it rolls. It's
But
that
you
simple.
are assuming a whole other force that nobody has even talked
Oh my
about.
God. That's ridiculous.
How is
Who
that
cares?
ridiculous?
Because like we're like, well, it can't do that because then it would have to impart electromagnetism or something, and you can't make that claim. It's fucking stupid.
I'm saying there's no models. There's no models that show
I
what you're
didn't
talking
claim there
about.
was one, dude. You're
But
the one
that's
that's stuck on models.
I am showing why I think the round Earth model is correct. This is
I'm just trying to point out a lie.
You're trying to point out what?
A lie.
Okay. You can call
That's
it a
all
lie.
I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to impart a model, dude. I don't want a model.
But
I
it's
don't know.
not enough to just say something is a lie. You do have to have a competing hypothesis. Why Why exactly?
Bullshit.
Why exactly do you need to, like, why do you think that the earth is not round? Like, you're the one that said that the earth is flat. You started
Because
this entire conversation. We have done weeks of shows where you were saying the earth is flat. You said, I don't know how it's flat. You didn't compete with a specific model, but you did say it was flat. So I have spent the last week researching flat earth and trying to learn about it because you said it was flat. And now you're telling me I don't have a model at all. I have nothing. I have no comparison. Well, that doesn't really leave me anywhere because my entire framework for this entire debate has been your criterion that there is a flat earth. Okay. I didn't make that rule. You made that rule. I have been operating by your rule.
Oh. I made you do it, huh?
You didn't make me do anything. I'm just saying these were the standards you set up. You said flat earth. And so I studied flat earth and tried to understand it. And I've looked at it and I do not understand how in the world it's any better than a round earth model. It seems infinitely worse.
I just think the ball's a lie, dude.
Okay. That's fine. But that completely restructures everything that we're talking about. Now you're just saying, okay, well, whatever's going on, the round earth isn't right. So I guess the best place to start then would be, why specifically do you think the round earth model is wrong?
Because everything else that these institutions tell us is a lie. Why would I not assume that that's a lie? And the reasons that they give us for why it's true don't make sense to me.
Okay, well, what if they make sense to other people?
They can be wrong.
Well, how do you know they're wrong, and how do you know you're not wrong?
Because I used to think the same thing they thought.
Okay, well, maybe you were right before.
Maybe not.
Do you see the problem? Like, you have to have reasons for stuff. Otherwise, you're just going, I don't know, man, maybe.
Yeah, like I said, I got out of this stuff a long time ago, but I don't have it all memorized anymore.
Well, I understand, and I've tried to be, like, sympathetic to that. So I'm going to recap everything that we went over, and then I'm going to wrap it up. So let's go from there. So, to recap, we have shown that there is a history of the round earth model, which proves this wasn't some conspiracy sprouted up 100 years ago to demoralize the public. Round earth model's been around for a long time. There are paintings as far back as the 1300s in Bibles showing the spherical model, meaning the church advocated for a spherical model as far back as the 1300s. They didn't believe that the earth is flat, like a lot of people claim. There is no clear, concise story as to why people decided to hide the flat earth. The opposing rotation of the stars in the northern and southern hemisphere to make the Earth model is untenable. The North Star has not been seen in the southern hemisphere, or at least certain regions of the southern hemisphere. We have not addressed why airplanes fly over the Pacific Ocean. The coffee cup caustic, or the REM theory, cannot explain how the 24-hour light cycles work with the northern and southern poles, because there's also 24-hour dark. So how does that work with the sun? Where is the sun? The opposing seasons, the seasonal reversal issue hasn't been addressed with. You've got entire different theories of magnetism and upward acceleration that I don't really feel like explain things as well as gravity does. The redshift proves depth among the stars. So does space exist or doesn't it in the flat Earth model? Already done that. Geocentrism is irrelevant. I didn't bring that point up. We also talked about the way the Bible verses are used is not proper literary criticism. And to prove that the Earth is round, we mentioned the fact that the sun is bigger in the winter and smaller in the summer. The only way you could get a bigger sun in the sky and things be colder is if there was a tilt. The seasonal reversals also can only really be explained by round Earth theory. Camera footage shows objects descending into the horizon. We repeated the reversal of the stars' points. We argued about the tall objects, whether that's like being obscured by light or whether or not it's because of a curvature downward. This was a snarky point I made, but I dropped it, so I'm not going to recount it. And then lastly, we talked about the changes in the angle of the face of the moon can only best be explained by a round Earth. And then my closing thoughts are, there are other points to be considered. This is the best I could do in a week after starting from zero. There are other arguments for the flat Earth perspective, experiments of radio waves, and I'm sure there are plenty others, but rather than trying to hit every point, I tried to highlight things that made the flat Earth model impossible. I also tried to dispel the presuppositions propping up the flat Earth model. This would be the conspiracy theories that supposedly popped up in the last 100 years. And I'll close my thing by saying that my main contention is that the flat Earth model has no model. You've got different competing explanations that address some phenomena but not others. So is the sun and the moon over the dome or under it? How high is the sun and the moon? Is it 3,000 feet up or is it 250,000 feet up? To my knowledge, there's no working model of how the sun and the moon orbit the plane that explains the night and day cycles and the seasonal cycles that we have. And
How would we get that?
I'm sorry?
How would we get that?
Get what? The
What you
night and
just
day
listed.
cycles?
Yeah, like how high up in the sky they are and all that shit. How would we get that?
Well, they use Erasmus's numbers, only they shrank them in scale to get the same angles of the shadow. So now they got a problem because they've got a much smaller and a much smaller sun and moon to work with. So the round Earth community assumes that the sun and moon is big and far away. They assume that the sun and the moon are small and close. Well, if it's small and close, that changes the mechanics of how the sun and the moon can rotate around the Earth. And there's no consistent model about how that smaller sun and moon actually do their orbits.
You believe we went to the moon?
That's irrelevant to this conversation completely.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I'm like, the jury's out as to whether or not we went to the moon. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know.
If the sun and the moon are, like, it would be if we'd been to the moon, it would be a placeholder because we would know for a fact how big it is, right? Because we've been there.
Okay, yeah.
So we would be able to use that as a placeholder to guarantee the distance of the sun.
But you're assuming we didn't go to the moon.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. It's a whole other rabbit hole. Some people say we went. Some people say we didn't went. I have no clue. I mean, either scenario wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know. But my issue with the flat Earth model is they've obligated themselves to a smaller sun and the moon because of Erasmus's equation. And since they've done that, there's like a jillion different models about how to get a correct orbit on the flat Earth plane, and none of them seem to work, to my knowledge. So, anyway, given all these different facts, I must conclude that the round Earth model is the best we have. And that's the end of my spiel.
Well.
And it only took 3 hours.
It was pretty good, man.
Yeah, I tried. So.
I enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. So, what do you think, Mr. Trevor?
I think you guys did pretty good.
You're going to turn your
Pretty
volume
quiet.
up, man.
I think you guys did pretty good.
Oh,
Gary
thank
did
you.
good. I haven't looked at this stuff in way too long, and I'm kind of like a lazy piece of shit for it.
Well, at least you looked at it.
Years ago.
Yeah, it's something I hadn't. This is all new to me. So, yeah, it's all new to me. So I really don't know what else to say beyond that.
Have you listened to Enoch yet?
Enoch? No, I got
Yeah.
like through a third of it, but I haven't listened to all of it.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah. It's good stuff.
yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else. I guess next week, to wrap this thing up, I think we ought to listen to people that are a little more knowledgeable than we are. So I was gonna pull up a debate from somebody else and then call it good.
Yeah.
So
That'd probably be a good way to end it.
yeah. And before we wrap up, Trevor, you're wanting to talk a little bit about the war in Ukraine. You're still wanting to do that?
It was just a thought. Like,
Because we went 3 hours. We can go another 30 minutes if you want, but it's up to
no,
you.
no, let's not do that. That's dangerous.
Yeah. All right. Well, Cody, what do you think? You got any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. Look into Enoch. I think you'll like it once you like really look at it.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll get into some Rob Skiba videos or something, and go from there.
Yeah, pull up some videos that you would like these guys, because you've given me several people's names. I haven't had the chance to look at them yet, so maybe we can do that next week. But we do need to wrap this flat Earth thing up.
Okay.
Move on to something else. So we'll maybe do Rob Skiba next week, and then maybe react to a debate, and then we're done with flat Earth. I'm
Thank
tired. All right. Well, I think that's it. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Thank you.